Thanks everyone for your patience. We resume. Item number 21, 542 Bathurst Street. And moderator, do we have the agent on the line?
Mr. Chair, Andrew's son is registered to speak to this application. Andrew, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Andrew, are you there? We can't hear you. In the meantime, I'm going to try calling the number that you gave us in your registration.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, is that Andrew?
Yes.
Glad to have you
Okay.
with us, Andrew. State your name, please.
Great. Yes, my name's Andrew Sun. I'm the agent of the 542 Bathurst Street. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee member.
Good afternoon to you. Andrew, just stand by for a moment. I'm going to ask my panel colleagues whether they'd like to hear a presentation or whether they have questions to ask you. Panel members, questions for the applicant? There don't appear to be any, and no request for a presentation. So panel, if anyone is ready, then to move to a motion, then we could do that.
Sort of Chair, just, I guess, maybe just confirmation. This is a semi, and I wonder if we could just ask the agent whether they've spoken to the owner of the adjacent property.
Good
just
question.
before we proceed.
Good question. Andrew,
Yes,
did you get
we have talked to them and regarding the addition and then the underpin it's going to do, and then it happens that they already done their underpin work, so they're pretty happy. We're just kind of matching with their level of the basement.
Ms. Hayes?
Chair, I just have one question. I know there's a declaration that this is a single-family residence. Just looking at the plans, I just wanted to confirm that because it seemed to be there was some facilities on the various floors that might suggest that they were going to be separate units.
Yes, we actually had that comments from the zoning examiner as well. The owners actually has because I think the unit, the building itself was purchased as it is, and then I guess for the current phase they're just trying to spending money on the elements that it's highlighted in not highlighted in not shaded, and then all the owners has actually it's a family. Is the husband and the wife and the brother. They signed the declaration form to state this unit will be a single dwell unit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can start. I think what's being proposed is not out of character. It is on a major street. We have no comments or concerns from planning or any other department. The FSI, I think, is reasonable increase. The depth is not substantive above the bylaw, and I'd be prepared to support the application.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Clay seconds. It is moved and seconded to approve the application. All those in favor, please, show of hands. And unanimous. unanimous carrying of the motion, and the application is approved. Panel moves on to item number 22, 17 Galley Avenue.
Thank you.
On this application, the panel has before it the applicant's submission, plus there is a 2014 Committee of Adjustment decision which affected the subject property. Mr. Moderator, do we have the agent with us?
Mr. Chair, we have Nelson Espinola, who's the registered agent here. Nelson, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Would you please state your name?
Nelson Espinola,
Very good.
as the agent for this application.
Thank you very much. Panel members, would you like to hear a presentation? Do you have questions for Mr. Espinola? There don't appear to be any. Is someone on the panel ready to proceed with the motion?
Happy to bring one forward, Chair. I think this is very, very straightforward. Just a one variance of modest increase in FSI, no other height, length or depth variances. I think it's quite reasonable given the character of this neighborhood. I move that we approve it, no conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? There is, Mr.
I would
Byatt.
second that.
Seconded by Mr. Byatt. So it is moved and seconded to approve the application. All those in favor? Show of hands, please. The motion is carried unanimously, and the application is approved. Panel moves forward to application number 2320, Frank Crescent. On number 2320, Frank, panel has before it the applicant's submission plus a 2017 Committee of Adjustment decision which affected the property. And moderator, do we have the agent for number 23?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have Edward Broders, who's registered agent here. Edward, you can go ahead. I've unmuted you.
Edward Broders here,
Good afternoon.
2191 Young Street.
Good afternoon.
Edward Broders Design, representing 22 Frank Crescent.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Panel members, do you have any questions for Mr. Broders? Or would you like to hear a presentation? I think we better hear a presentation, actually. Oh, no, pardon me. I don't think we need a presentation on this one. Do any of the panel members request a presentation? Or are there, if there are questions, fine. If not, we could move to a motion.
Chair, looking at the plans, it seems that what's being proposed is minor in nature. I don't think that the FSI being requested is out of character with the neighborhood, and I would be prepared to move a motion to support and approve the application.
Thank you. Second to that motion? Mr. Byatt. It is moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor? Okay, all those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion is carried unanimously and the application is approved. With that, panel proceeds to number 24, 23 TYRREL Avenue. And on this application, the panel has before it applicant's materials. We have staff reports from Urban Forestry, and transportation services. And we have 3 form letters in support, signed by the owners and occupants of 19, 21, and 25 TYRREL Avenue, received on the 14th of May. Now, on this one, I'm going to request a presentation because because of the transportation report which we received. I'd like to hear the applicant's presentation on this matter. So applicant, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Glenn Rubinoff for the homeowner. So this is an application for a second-story addition to an existing home and a rebuilding of the porch in front. It has before you 3 variances. One is related to the setback, which is existing, because that's kind of where the existing porch is. And the density variance is related to adding the additional space for that addition on the 2nd floor. The 3rd variance is related to a front parking space, a parking pad in front. One of the items we submitted to the committee was a map that showed the homes on the street which have front pad parking. I think it's a colored one. You'll find it. I downloaded it from the website, so I know it's on there. Anyways, the majority of the street, people have front pad parking. What this property has, I read the report by transportation. Their concern is about, why should you have a front pad when there's access to the rear? This is not a mutual drive. Just to be clear, these are private drives. The actual width adjacent to the building is 1.96 meters, so it's not quite even 2 meters. And in theory, a fence could go up along the side, and it's extremely tight to drive there. My clients have just looked at this site and determined if they could fit a front pad in the front yard. And it's similar to next door at 25. They have a front pad as well, and the majority of the street, in fact, all the houses to the left, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 houses to the left, they all have front pad parking. And then not 21, but number 19 on the other side also has a front pad. And then that's the corner of the street. So it's not something, and we did speak with all the neighbors about it, and 21 and 25 and 19 were all in support of this application. The parking space is entirely on the property, so it doesn't require an application for off-street parking. It's entirely fits onto the property. But it's a reasonable scenario that providing a front pad parking where this is what's consistent in the neighborhood. It's more convenient for the family, but also the fact that it's not a mutual means that situation could change. Some other owner could come in, decide to put a fence up, and then we're in a very tight situation there. So so those are the 3 variances today. That's the map I was showing. Those are the front pad parking spots indicated. Planning had no concerns with it as well. They didn't write a report because they felt there was nothing really to speak on it. In terms of the other variances before you, I think the density is is consistent with redevelopment in the area. The actual addition is just a small second-story addition of 79 square feet. So the majority of the house, the variance is primarily, it's very minor. It doesn't account for very much of it. And that's really, and again, the existing front yard setback is really what's being maintained. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Applicant, any questions for the applicant? Panel members? Yes, Ms. Hayes?
Just one question for you. I acknowledge that there's a lot of front yard parking. A lot of it doesn't seem to have curb cuts. I just want to understand your submission correctly. Do those that have front yard parking, are those authorized front yard parking, or they've just created front yard parking?
A lot of the homes, they have, this map just indicates where their people are parking in front of their home, that they don't have a garage, they don't have access to the rear. So I'm assuming they're authorized front yard parking spots.
Yeah. It's just when I looked, some of them have, driveway parking, and then they've got front yard, but there doesn't seem to be any curb cut. So, which leads me to believe they might not have been approved. However, having said that, on the opposite side of the street, closer to the corner, there's a new build, and there's no side yard to allow. Do you know what whether or not there's something there approved for parking in on that application?
I know that number 26 was approved for front yard parking.
Okay, and that's the new build, right on the other side of the street?
Side of the street, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And that was approved through committee for front yard parking, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Rubinoff. You mentioned that in one direction there are, I think your number was that there are 8 houses with front yard pads. And are those houses, I know we don't exactly know whether those are authorized front yard paths or not, but are those all houses with driveways that go to the rear? Or
Several of them do have driveways, but they're not very wide. I think the main issue is when you have fixtures, over time people have put in air conditioners or meters and such, and it gets extremely tight. So people have applied for variance for it, but they're all, some of them would be going through the off-street parking because part of the space would be on city property and part of it would be on private. In our case, we're entirely on private, so we don't have that issue to deal with. But there are some of them do have driveways, similar conditions.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Still, your proposal would remove one street parking spot from availability, and I can see transportation's point in that. My gosh, if all of a sudden the trend was toward houses with driveways and rear garages all having front yard parking, then that would not be a desirable development to see at all.
Well, the curb could be closed up. It's not a right of way. It doesn't have to be maintained on the other side. So that's why I'm saying it would be a relocation of a parking space from being a narrow 6 foot, 4 inches wide driveway, which is effectively what it is, to a proper parking space in the front. And that curb could be repaired and closed up. There's no, it's not an easement that needs to be maintained as hard surface. So it could be greened up and restored. So I don't think it would take up more than just relocating, really.
Okay, that's okay. I don't think that's in the application that you would actually be taking out the curb cut for the existing driveway.
I'm just trying to see if they put anything in there. It says here, the nature of the proposed construction, it does not appear to change the access parking condition, materially change. So I'm not sure that it would have provided additional parking. I don't think it would necessarily remove a parking space on the street there. I just know that they just trying to see if they put anything here.
Members, I have a concern that if a condition were to be imposed to close the existing curb cut, it could cause an additional variance, because the variance right now is just for a front yard parking pad. If you remove the existing curb cut for the driveway that leads to their legal parking space, they may need an additional variance for not providing the required parking for the site.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer.
May I just say something on that? My understanding is you have to have one legal spot on the property. Since it's a completely on their property parking pad on the front, I believe that technically meets the requirement for parking in lieu of having one in the rear if it's approved in the front.
No, it's not the required parking space, though. A parking space usually has to be provided by an attached or detached garage or rear yard parking space. A front yard parking pad isn't permitted, so it doesn't count as your required parking space.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Byatt, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I'm just looking at a Google Map image of this property. I hope I'm looking at the correct one. There's a driveway that takes you to the back of the property. It's a shared driveway. There's a double car garage on behind 23 from what I can see, and a garage, of course, to the neighbor. Is that still that's existing, I take it?
Yes, that's existing, but it's not a legal right-of-way. There's no easement on the property. So the actual width on each part, like I said, you know, if the neighbor were to apply for a front pad, there's no requirement. There's no set easement in place on title to maintain it as access. I do recognize that it's there and it exists, and I guess potentially would serve as a, you know, access for the neighbor. You know, how, you know, just being able to go back and maintain the back of your property and that. But that is the existing condition.
So does your does the owner currently use the driveway and for parking and go to the back?
Well, they can't park in the front because it is kind of, the width of it wouldn't fit each of them to have a spot. So the owner parks in front of the house just effectively because he can't, you know, to go all the way to the back. It's one of those. It is unusual on this street. I mean, I'm just looking at the Google Maps as well, and I'm seeing everybody is parked in the front just because of the convenience factor, but also it's just it seems to be part of the neighborhood makeup. But I'm just saying they can't park next to the house, but they'd have to go all the way to the back.
Thank you. Okay. Any further questions for the applicant panel? If not, we'll move forward and take this application into committee for quick discussion. The moderator, there's no one waiting for us. We're waiting to speak, is there no?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
No.
So let's take it into committee and then move to a motion, please. thoughts on this application, panel members?
As the applicant pointed out, unlike often where there's mutual driveways, there's a right-of-way. On the survey, it doesn't suggest that there is. So to his point that legally somebody could actually, put a fence up in the middle or lessen the width, which would almost make it probably unable to access the back. I certainly acknowledge that there is a lot of front pad parking. Whether or not it's legal, I haven't heard those submissions, but it certainly would not be out of character with what already exists on the street. It's whether or not transportation is concerned that it would further lessen the available parking on that street.
Thank you.
Those are my initial comments.
Thank you for those. Other thoughts, panel?
I'll just wait. I mean, I'm kind of agnostic about this one, but I noticed there's a tree in the front yard where the parking pad was going on. There is a forestry condition with respect to the front addition. I just wonder whether, I just don't know what the impact of that tree would have on a parking pad there. Would it be subject to the same conditions that forestry would put on if there were any concerns or restrictions on putting a pad right next to a tree? I just asked that question. Maybe I should have asked the agent.
Well, maybe we can go back to the agent if we choose
I
to.
wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind. I'm sorry.
It's a good question. Let's ask the agent. Agent, do you hear the question about the tree?
I apologize.
Yes, there was a tree report for those two trees in front. And obviously the thought was to minimize the impact on either tree. There's two trees in front. You can see them in the front of the steps there at the very top of the site plan on either side of the walkway. We felt that the parking space on the left was the least invasive space, as opposed to widening the driveway on the right-hand side, which would result in the loss of that tree. So the thought was, and the report is in for to put the parking pad on the farther side has less impact. And that's why it was located there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe, Chair, could I maybe ask Barb just the point of clarification with respect? So hypothetically, if we were to approve this variance, would they have to then go and seek a parking pad permit, and would that trigger a review about whether that pad would be affected by those trees?
I don't think it would trigger anything related to the trees, but the Toronto and East York District has a varied history on front yard parking pads. Certain parts of the district permit them, some are absolutely prohibited. I can't speak to this particular site, so they would still have to go through the process of getting the curb cut and getting the permission from the front yard parking pad, which is independent of the committee's decision.
Right.
So if they're not entitled to it, there's no other avenue.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
That is helpful. Any further comments, panel, or are we, Mr. Byatt, go ahead.
Just a quick one, Mr. Chair. What puzzles me always is we do have a shared driveway, walkway. And yes, it's theoretically possible that one neighbor might decide to put up a fence on his or her side of that easement. The likelihood of that happening to me seems very remote. Both properties have got garages at the back. there's enough width to get your vehicle to the back. In fact, behind 23, it looks like a double car garage, so it's a pretty sizable space. To then counter a recommendation by transportation, which suggests no front part parking, confounds me a bit. And I think that's the reason why I may not be able to support this application.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And that's a good point. Transportation has obviously thought this through to come up with a specific recommendation to us to refuse that variance. So we could, I think, refuse that variance as transportation directs without refusing the entire application. Let's ask Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer. Madam, could we do that, Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer? As transportation?
Yes, you can. Yes.
So there's one option open to us if we give weight to transportation's recommendation. Mr. Cheng, any thoughts?
Sorry, I forgot to mute. I basically agree with that strategy. I mean, I would follow the transportation staff report and just refuse that. Let the other one accept it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Byatt.
Mr. Chair, in which case, may I move a motion
Yes.
that the application accepts variances 1 and 2 and refuses number 3.
Motion. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by
There's forestry condition number 1.
And I beg your pardon, yes, subject to forestry condition number 1.
Very good. So, is there a second to that motion? Mr. Cheng, you were about to second. Do you still? Yes. Okay.
Right.
So, the motion is to approve variances 1 and 2, refuse 3, subject to forestry. It is moved and seconded to do that. All those in favor, show of hands, please. Those opposed? So it is a unanimous vote, I think, in favor. Mr. Clay, am I correct? You voted? Yeah, very good, okay. It is a unanimous vote to approve the application as amended. So the application is so approved. And panel moves along to item number 25.
I just need to use the bathroom. I'll be back in the next case.
Carry on. Thank you. We go on to 25, which is .846 Palmerston Avenue. On this application, the panel has before it applicant materials. We have 10 photographs of the surrounding neighborhood. We have a report from Urban Forestry. And we have correspondence in support from 62 Vermont Avenue, plus an additional 10 form letters in support from the following addresses on Palmerston: 840, 842, 844, 848, 850, 852, and 854. And also there is another correspondence in support from 852 Palmerston. So, moderator, on this application.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Joe Mazzatelli is the registered agent speaking to this application. Joe, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Very good.
Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. State your name, please.
Yes, Joseph Mazzatelli.
Thank you. Panel members, any questions for Mr. Mazzatelli? Would you like to have that presentation?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, then, in that case, we can move to a motion if someone is ready to do so.
Sure, I'll go ahead. I think this is indeed very minor. There are many, many other examples of front walkouts on this street. So I believe it meets the 4 tests, and I would move to approve the application subject to forestry condition number 1.
Is there a second to that motion? It is seconded by Mr. Byatt. All those in favor, show of hands, please. And it is unanimously carried to approve the application subject to forestry. Panel moves along to item 26. 12, PEVERIL Hill North. And moderator, do we have the agent with us?
Mr. Chair, Jonathan Minkowski is the registered agent. He's here.
And could you tell us, we have some registered speakers.
Good afternoon, panel.
Good afternoon. Just one moment, please. Can you tell me how many registered speakers we have online?
Mr. Chair, we had 5, but we had 1 cancellation, so we're down to 4.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Benskowski. I'll ask you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Okay. You'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation to the panel. Please proceed.
Yes, please. Can we bring up my support material provided, please? So I'm just going to start with the front yard parking. In my submitted material, I just did include a picture of the front portion of the dwelling as it exists today. There is no request for any change in terms of the front pad parking that's there today. And as we can see from a note from transportation, there is no objection to it, to that variance. Sorry, I'm just trying to give it a sec so I can.
So, Jonathan, I think your supporting material was submitted late, so the committee members don't have that in their package.
I know, Madam Secretary, I was actually retained that night, so I tried my best to get it in. I'm hoping we're able to bring it up, as like I said, I was retained that day, actually at night, and wasn't able to submit anything. Okay, but I can proceed with my presentation regardless. In terms of the building length, the building length, as it is proposed before you today, really is requesting a 0.51 meter request at the rear. So the existing front has a small bay, and we can actually see it on here. That bay extends into the basement. Because that existing bay extends into the basement, the actual measurement for length is taken from that portion. So what we see, and what I actually had prepared was a slide of 3 drawings adjacent to each other. The actual projection that's going beyond 17 meters is only appropriated on the 2nd floor, and that is for 0.61 meters. That 0.61 meter request isn't for the entire rear wall. If we could even just go to the 2nd floor of this, please, in the submitted plan for the proposed. Correct, thank you, that one there. If we could just go back 1. Yep, so what we see at the rear of the house is a bathtub. That portion there is what's in excess of the 17 meters. And that proportion there is only for the bathtub that's in excess. The actual main wall of the dwelling is as per the zoning bylaw of 17 meters. Now that request for a deck is actually shielded by the bathtub on the north side of the page. as well as a wall that extends on the south side of the page. So that would limit any impact into the adjacent dwellings that are there. In terms of the FSI, that FSI is also not tied to a request of side yard setback, nor is it a request for any height. That request is only tied to a built form of 0.61 meters by 2.18 meters, which is for that bathtub we spoke of previously. In terms of the secondary suite having an alteration to the main front wall, if we could just go to the first floor, please, and maybe zoom in there. The actual location of the entrance for the proposed basement unit is off the side. So the two doors that we see would actually lead you one into the first as well as one into the basement. So that is actually a side entrance that's coming off there. There is no alteration to the main front wall for the secondary suite. The zoning bylaw, it doesn't matter where that location is going. If any renovation is linked to the addition of a secondary suite, it automatically triggers this bylaw. So in terms of the front facade of the building, there is no alteration to that front facade to facilitate that secondary suite in the basement. In terms of the last variant, committee, I'm not quite sure I understand why this is being requested. Like I said, I was retained basically on the day of the document disclosure. Basically, the last variance reads about the interior floor area has to be less than 45%. This is a basement apartment that is being proposed with 2 floors of living up above it. So I'm not quite sure how this variance for the 45% is there. Nonetheless, I hadn't had a chance to speak with an examiner, but I can tell you that this is a conventional basement apartment with 2 functional floors of living up above it that are appropriated essentially in a dwelling that is 17 meters long, except when we take that front bay, as we can see here in the basement being the thick black line, as well as the tub that has been offered on the 2nd floor. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have right now.
Thank you for that very much. Okay. Panel members, perhaps we'll go to those speaking in opposition. And just before we do go to those speaking in opposition, I would like to list the correspondence in opposition which we did receive and have before us. So beyond having the applicant's materials and a report from Transportation Services, we also have correspondence in opposition from 31 Peveril Hill, 118 Dewburn, 1396 Eglinton Avenue West, and from the future owners of 129 Chiltern Hill Road. So.
Also, Mr. Chair, the agenda has a document labeled as planning email correspondence, but it's actually from Transportation Services, indicating that they have no objections.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer. Okay then, moderator.
Mr. Chair, Brian Gray is the first speaker registered.
Thank you.
Brian, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We hear you well. Thank you. State your name, please.
Thank you. It's Brian Gray.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I live at 18 Peveril Hill North, 3 houses north of the property at issue. I'm no longer on the WebEx online, so I can't direct you to any diagrams, but I'll do my best. I'm on the phone now. I just wanted to point out that there's a number of reasons why this plan is not minor in nature, and then in addition to that, I'd just like to provide background on the way the subject property has been maintained, kept, and used since the current owner has taken possession of it a number of years ago. As others have pointed out in written submissions to the committee, the alteration to the building floor space is vastly larger than a minor variance. By my calculation, the permitted floor space is 0.4 times the area lot, but the altered building is proposed to have 0.77 times the area of the lot, which is almost 100% above the permitted maximum. This inhibits and greatly reduces green space on the property, and it's just frankly inappropriate. The rear second floor balcony is as well overly large. It's 45% above the maximum permitted area, and the plans call for an additional parking space on the front yard, which inhibits and reduces green space and is more than a minor variance. Additionally, it surprised me that the builder and owner thinks that alteration to the main wall that faces the street to add a second door for the second unit is a minor variance. I don't view that as a minor variance. In fact, I think it's not a minor variance at all. Finally, before I get into the use of the property since change of ownership a number of years ago, I would just say that the street is single family dwelling. It is not a street for duplexes, and not a street for duplexes that will be rented in a fashion I think that has been carried on in the past. So over the last few years, the property has been used illegally as an Airbnb. Lots of transient dwellers in the property, and as I think you're all aware, Airbnb usage through the pandemic was not allowed. But me and other neighbors have noticed a number of short-term renters in the property over that period of time. The upkeep of the property over the period of time that it was used as a short-term rental through Airbnb and similar services has been deplorable. There's been no upkeep to the property, and as you saw, I think, Mr. Chairman, in various submissions, the house is in disrepair, and it's really unbecoming in a neighborhood where people take pride in their property. I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions, panel? Moderator, who's with us next?
Mr. Chair, the next registered speaker is Jerry Babin, but Jerry doesn't seem to be here. We've called and emailed him, but haven't had a response. So the next registered speaker is Elsa Renzella.
Okay.
Elsa, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
I think you do it. Sorry, my husband's also on that list. We registered both, so I'm going to allow Murray Stever to speak now. That's okay.
Thank you very much. You're both listed, yes.
It's Murray Stever here. Elsa and I live at 8 Peveril Hill North. 8 Peveril Hill North is 2 houses south of the subject property. I don't have a whole lot extra to say other than what Mr. Gray said. I reiterate his comments, starting with the way this property has been taken care of. It's been a bit of an eyesore, is an understatement. You know, the illegal use for Airbnb and just the entire lack of care for the property or the people that live around them is quite obvious. I don't know the lawn, the weeds are, I think they were indicated in one of the letters of objection, are huge, and they just don't seem to have any regard for their neighbors whatsoever, and no interest in complying with city bylaws, both with respect to the care of their property and with respect to their Airbnb use. In terms of the actual concern, other than that, I agree with Mr. Gray. This isn't a minor variance. If you could double the size of what's allowed in terms of the construction of your property, If that's considered minor, I'm at a loss to know what's considered major. They are basically going from 0.4 to 0.77, which is almost double, and again, it has an effect on green space, and it has an effect on a precedent that it sets for the whole neighborhood, in particular this street. The street has houses, many of which have additions, including mine, and all within the limit that they were allowed to. For my house, I can indicate we didn't make the addition, but I know that when the previous owners added onto our house, they had decisions they had to make in terms of what they could do with the space they were allowed, and they went to the maximum they were allowed under the bylaw, and they made their choices. And I would suggest to you that the new owners of this house, the subject property, should be making decisions. A minor variance of some lower percentage certainly is something that could be considered, I would suggest, but doubling it is just setting a precedent where all of a sudden this house and the next house that comes before you and the next house becomes before you are doubling the size. And then we have a whole new look to the street. The green space disappears entirely or significantly. So, for those reasons, I would suggest that it's just simply not appropriate, because it's not a minor variance at all. And looking at the test, it's not appropriate. It's not desirable, certainly not for everybody that lives around them. Essentially, on the final point I'd like to make is with respect to the balcony. I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Gray in terms of his comments about that. I can tell you, we spend a lot of time in our backyard. We're 2 houses away. The lot next door is probably about 30 feet wide. They're going to move back, and essentially, me and my kids are going to have a huge deck overlooking our balcony or our backyard, which impacts us tremendously on our privacy and the privacy of the other neighbors. It's particularly challenging now, given the fact that we spend so much time outside during the pandemic. So I'd like to raise that issue as well. Those are my submissions.
I'd also just add, just as a final note, that I think it speaks volumes that the initial submissions on this application by, the applicant focused on what in their mind was minor, but made no reference to some of the more significant concerns in terms of the almost doubling of the size of the house and the size of the balcony, which is 45% greater than what is allowed. So I think that plus past conduct with the Airbnb just demonstrates their ability not to address the real issues here.
Okay, thanks. On those, so you're concerned about the balcony and overlook. Are there any other impacts you can describe to us about what the proposal will mean to your enjoyment of your property day to day? Actual impacts on you.
Well, when you go back, obviously it's going to have an impact on the sun in terms of, or on the light. But, I'm very concerned about having a large deck. I appreciate they're allowed a deck on the second floor, but a large deck, because, again, I've got, teenage children, and we sit outside, and I don't need a big party going on the second floor. I can also indicate from a precedential perspective, my next door neighbor has a small house with no addition that's very old. This is the house between the two, and if you start allowing, somehow calling this a minor variance, well, what happens next? Well, they're going to move at some point soon, I would imagine, and all of a sudden we've got 2 monster homes on the street. And this is a monster home. This is I think it's like a 30-foot lot. Their house would be essentially, it would be huge for the lot size that it is. So it creates a situation where, you have the effect of it's one, and then another, and then another.
Thank you very much. Panel, any questions for these speakers? Okay, moderator, are there any speakers yet to be heard from?
No, Mr. Chair, that's everybody.
Okay, in that case, thank you. We'll return to the applicant. And applicant, what I'm going to ask you to comment on is themes that I heard in both of the speakers we did hear from, both of whom feel that the variances you're asking for represent a development that is not minor in its variance from the bylaw, that it represents overbuild, almost what they call double overbuild. They're also concerned about overlook from the balcony, and the fact that the balcony being larger could be the site of get-togethers and so on. So your comments on those items, please.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Binkowski.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking and I realized I was muted. Could we go to the first floor, please? So if we go to the proposed first floor, and let's just zoom, if we can just zoom in on the floor plans itself. So what we see here is we actually see a first floor proposed at 17 meters. So the first floor that's proposed is exactly as per the zoning bylaw. As mentioned before, the small existing bay at the front, if that bay were not to be connected to the structure of the basement, that would be a permitted encroachment that would not go into length. Because that is going into the basement, that 0.61 meters is contributing to a portion of that request for building length. Now, my friend also spoke of the alteration of the front main wall. As we can see, the front main wall entrance services the primary unit, being the first floor and the second. The entrance to the basement is that recessed portion off of the side from the carport, which is a typical design feature when we have a carport. One of the other issues my friend spoke of was the duplex. This is not a duplex that is proposed before you today. This is a secondary suite. A duplex allows for separation of units to be vertically. These are being separated horizontally, the opposite. These are being separated horizontally, whereas a duplex is allowed vertically, where you can have a front to back. This is not that situation. This is a conventional secondary suite. In terms of a loss of green space, again, this is done under a zoning review, not a waiver. There is no request before you for any type of reduction of front or rear landscaping. And if we could now go to the second floor, please, to speak to some of the overlook. If we could zoom in at the back balcony, please. So what we see at the rear balcony, as mentioned, we have a 17.61 meter portion here. That is for the projection of the tub. So the only built form aspect that is contributing to this increase in FSI is for this portion. If we were to take this small portion out, all aspects of the dwelling, meaning setbacks, building length, building depth, building height, would be as per the zoning bylaw. FSI can be distributed and facilitated in many different ways on a property. In this case, the only portion of the control of the built form aspect deals with this tub itself. In terms of overlook from the balcony, a 4 square meter balcony is permitted. This is being proposed at 5.7 meters. What's being done here to mitigate any overlook or privacy is this balcony has been set in from the dwelling. Rather than the projection being off of the main wall of the rear of the second floor, this projection is actually inside of the building itself. So rather than having generally a condition of privacy screening, the privacy screening is actually the structure of the dwelling with it being built in. In terms of this being able to be a sort of party deck, I mean, this is a 3'6" wide deck, which is essentially the width of a typical stair. I'm not sure how many people could fit on a typical stair with and have a party on it. This is located off the master bedroom, which is intended to be occupied by the owner's parents who plan on living here. In terms of the state of the property for the past couple of years, I can't really speak to that. I'm not really aware of that. What I can tell you is the proposal before you today is to bring the property up to the standards of a secondary suite would be required. Meaning, if this were approved, a building permit would be required to bring that to bring that basement floor ceiling up to code of the OBC, meaning fire separation, fire dampers, and things like that. So the actual idea of a property of disrepair being brought into repair, in my opinion, should be somewhat of a positive view when we look at somebody looking to invest in a property and have a legal unit as per the City of Toronto.
Sorry,
And I'm
Mr.
happy to answer
Chair.
any.
Sorry to interrupt. We've missed one speaker, Eric Brewer, who still would like to address the committee with his comments.
Yes, thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer. So, okay, Mr. Benkowski, thank you to you. And we are going to do something a little unusual here. Even though Mr. Benkowski has rebutted, we want to make sure that everybody that wishes to speak to this application and who had registered is allowed the opportunity. So let's now go to the speaker with whom we had difficulty connecting before.
Mr. Brewer, are you there?
Yes. Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can
Very clearly.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm going to just put on the speaker.
For the record, could you state your name, please?
Yes, I'm Eric Brewer.
Please go ahead, Mr. Brewer. You have 5 minutes if you need it.
Okay, fine. First, let me mention one quick thing. You mentioned there was someone wrote in from 1396 Eglinton Avenue West. That's Mr. Pfizer. He's, I think, lives opposite the applicant. It's just, this was his business address. We're concerned about a number of things. One is that we're not sure, is it true that you don't have to register an Airbnb? That is perfectly legal? Because this house is being registered as an Airbnb. And because if it's illegal, then it should be shut down as an Airbnb. That's the first point. In general, this is a family neighborhood with lots of young children, and I would hate to, they're all single family homes, and I would hate to see the character of this neighborhood being changed just for the benefit of one property owner. We've lived here for more than 40 years, and it's a really nice area, and only single family live here. Just go through some of the things that I've written down. Well, we're concerned about it acting as a dangerous precedent if you allow one home to become a two-suite house or two-suite dwelling. That just opens the door for many others. We're concerned about increases in traffic and parking problems. We already have too much traffic and too many parking problems in this area. I'm going to skip a lot of some of these things because they've already been mentioned. Well, it just sort of in conclusion, it's I think that the request makes a mockery of the current legislation governing acceptable building standards in the neighborhood, and I think that a lot of these variances are major, not minor. And I have to tell you that I'm not in the habit of opposing requests. I've been here for 40 years and I can't remember the last time when I opposed anything. I think basically that sums up what I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Any questions for the speaker panel? Hearing none. Okay, then we then can return. We'll bring Mr. Benkowski on for just a minute, and some of the issues raised there were not before us, but we can raise the issue of Mr. Benkowski. You with us again?
I'm here, sir.
Okay. Issues raised by this speaker. I guess two that I'd ask you just to any comment on these would be one would be whether this will create any additional traffic on the street, and number two, the question of it being out of character because the neighborhood is single family dwellings. Please.
The zoning bylaw permits accessory suites. Sorry, can you hear me now?
We do hear you well.
The zoning bylaw permits accessory suites throughout the city and is permitted in this location. If that door on the existing dwelling were to be fully on the side with a principal entrance there, we wouldn't be before you today, albeit we do have another addition that is before you today. So secondary suites are permitted as per the zoning bylaw 100%. In fact, you don't even have to wait the 5-year period anymore for a building permit to be issued, as well as recent official plan amendments were put in from the OP to encourage secondary suites. In terms of traffic, this is located near Eglinton, which is obviously, as we know, you know, a significant transit area. So I guess I would just say to that secondary suites are encouraged throughout the city and is a use that is permitted.
Thank you very much. Panel members, are there any final questions for the applicant? Yes? We'll go first with Mr. Cheng, then Mr. Clay. Mr. Cheng?
Hi, yes. Can you go to drawing proposed elevations A8? So I just have a quick question to the agent.
Yeah.
Oh, there are several A8. I'm actually looking for the front elevation. This is the one, yes, please. So I think a lot of your variances is coming from the entrance on the right side here, am I right? Is that the reason why you got variance number 5, where you are changing
Correct.
front main wall? So the examiner considered that as a front main wall, even though on the plan is kind of recessed at the back.
So the way the zoning bylaw interprets it, as soon as you are altering, as soon as you're putting in a secondary suite and you do an addition, and there's anything on the front main wall that's altered, it triggers that variance. So even if this were to have been turned to a side door, it would be irrelevant. They view it as a zoning bylaw as any alteration of a dwelling in conjunction with the addition of a secondary suite does it. It doesn't make a difference.
Because I did follow the whole process of how this secondary street got legalized, and one concern was about having an entrance at the front street was not allowed, and how can you create this secondary street? So at the end, the zoning bylaw allows a second entrance for the secondary street facing the main wall, but without creating an expansion. So you are kind of trapped in between. You have the door facing the front, which is allowed, but that door is popped out on the side, and that triggers all this issue. Okay, and I'm just curious. Throughout your design process, there's no way you can eliminate this door here, because it looks
correct
like
with it being
that's how
considered the main wall.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, Mr. Clay.
All right.
Thanks. I thought Aaron was going to ask the same question I did. I would draw your attention to drawing A8, but it's the rear elevation. Maybe we can pull that up. Yeah, that one. So if you, I just want to understand the rear second-story balcony a little bit better. I think you said that the balcony, the 5.8 meter balcony is recessed. So I'm assuming the walls on either side come out and the screening goes laterally across. Is that correct?
Yes, the best way to look at this would be through one of the side elevations if we were to go to A9. So as we see here on one of the sides, this would be A9, which would be the south elevation. You can see there that the balcony is recessed there. And if we go to A10, which is the north, you can see it's also recessed there. The balcony is built within that projection for the tub on the second floor. So, right. so as I mentioned earlier through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Clay, we often ask for privacy screening on the side to prevent any type of overlook. In this case, the privacy screen is actually built into the dwelling with it being recessed inside of it.
Yeah, and thanks. That's exactly the explanation I was looking for, but that doesn't really answer the question that I was going to ask, which is, you know, I think it's fair to say that if people are concerned about privacy overlook, if you're standing on that deck at that railing, you can I mean, irrespective of that being solid sidewalls, you still have lots of visual access in your neighbor's room. So I think what I'm wondering is whether that balcony screening that is right across the back should be opaque as well.
We would have no issue making that opaque to 42 inches, absolutely.
42 inches, yeah, it was 1.5 meters, right? Yep, okay, that's good. I think that might help some of the issues about the adjacent neighbors and concerns about privacy.
Very good. Any further questions of the applicant, Mr. Byatt?
I have one question.
Mr. Hayes.
With respect to the FSI, I'm not quite sure of what you were trying to get to with respect to the 0.77 and the justification for that.
Okay. Is there any way we can bring up the material that I submitted, which had the side-by-side floor plans that I created?
What's the existing FSI on the building, and what's being added in total across the 2 floors?
So the addition that's being proposed is for, it is 9:30. So the proposed addition is 419 square feet on the on the second floor, and a little bit less on the first. So we're looking at about a 700 square foot addition. But where I was going with how that FSI has been appropriated, that FSI stays for the second floor bump out of the hub, which we just spoke of, which was providing some of the screening for that second floor balcony. The other entire built form envelope of the dwelling is as per the zoning bylaw, meaning 17 meters in length.
I understand that part. I understand the depth and length part. But are there other examples of FSIs of 0.77?
Again, I was just retained on this file. There are examples. If you bear with me for 1 sec, I do have further examples, but I can't bring them up on the screen. But if you do give me 1 sec, I can bring them up for you, and I can tell you.
Okay.
1 sec. So on Dewborn, we have an FSI of 0.83. At 179 Dewborn, we have 0.85. 147 Dewborn, 0.88.
Anything on
Dewborn point? I'm trying to get there.
Sorry.
I have to cycle through everything on my end here.
That's fine. That's fine. Do you see anything on this street?
Yes, I do have some on PEVERIL. I just need to get there.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Byatt, after this question, it's your turn with your question. So, standing by with your question, please.
I cannot seem to find them. Again, bear with me. PEVERIL had an FSI of 0.775, which would be adjacent, which would be near. That's the one I can find in my notes here, would be 20 PEVERIL,
Okay, I think
which
we'll
has an FSI of 775. But I think it's also important to note where the property sits in relation to the adjacent properties. We're not extending into the rear yard, albeit it's only a 0.61 meter really increase in the length that's contributing to that FSI.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go to Mr. Baya's question now.
Just a quick one, it's slightly different one. A number of folks who spoke in opposition or kind of concerned raised the question of the use of the property, Airbnb. And I heard you mention something about the owner's, a suite for the owner's parent. Could you elaborate on that, please?
As I understand from I was retained by the son, that the intention is for the parents to live on the first and second floor and rent out the basement.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions for the applicant, then let's take this application into committee for discussion, moving toward a motion. And I'll ask anyone to open the discussion, please. If anyone is ready for a motion, that's fine too, but otherwise.
Well, Chair, I'll start. I'm sure others will chime in. I think overall, if I look at all the variances and the explanation from the agent, it would appear that, to me anyways, that the increases over as of right are relatively modest. I don't think they're substantial. I don't think the addition is out of character. They are larger homes on larger lots in this neighborhood. I get the issue about the entrance on facing the road, but it is indented and offset a little bit, so it does mitigate that concern. Secondary uses are permitted, or secondary suites are permitted, so I'm not uncomfortable with this application. I would maybe, others may have other things, but if committee agrees, I would like to put a condition in with respect to screening of the second story balcony wall.
Good thought, thank you. Yes, please. Further comment, please.
Well, in the absence of that, maybe I'll just make mine a motion then, Chair.
Go ahead.
If that's okay. It doesn't sound like anyone disagrees, so I'll move approval of this application. There are no conditions from staff, so just with the condition that the second story balcony be constructed with opaque screening to 1.5 meters.
Thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion? There is from Ms. Hayes. Thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve with that condition. All those in favor, show of hands, please. And the motion is carried unanimously. The application is approved. At this point, I'm going to call for a brief recess to allow the panel members a brief break. So we'll be back in 10 minutes at 6:05, proceeding with the next item, which at that time will be number 2796 RIVERCREST. We shall resume now, and the panel is now addressing agenda item number 27, 96 Rivercrest Road. On this application we have before us the applicant's submitted materials. There's a covering letter from the agent from May 25th. There is a report from TRCA from February, and there is correspondence both in support and in opposition. There are two form letters in support from owners of 93 and 98 Rivercrest. There is correspondence in interest or concern from 41A Halford Avenue, retracting opposition, and there is opposition from there is a letter of opposition from 41A Halford Avenue from the same people. So that's dated May the 21st, and then they retract that on May the 26th with further correspondence. So in fact, at this point, there is no correspondence in opposition. Very good. So, moderator, do we have the agent with us?
Mr. Chair, Jay Smith is the agent registered to speak to this item. Jay, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Jay Smith. I'm the agent for 96 Rivercrest Road.
Thank you very much. Panel members, we have the agent with us. Do you wish to hear a presentation? Do you have any questions for the agent? Don't appear to be any questions for the agent. So are we ready to move to a motion?
Chair, I'd like to move a motion to approve the application. I believe what's being requested is indeed minor. The existing FSI is 0.67, and in the materials provided, there were a number of examples provided of other properties in the neighborhood, so I believe that it's not out of character, and I would move to support the application, and TRCA says there is no permit required.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Byatt. It is moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor? Show of hands, please. And the motion is carried unanimously. The application is approved. Item number 28 has already been closed. We move to item number 29. And And on this item, moderator, can you give me an idea how many speakers we have waiting to speak in opposition?
Mr. Chair, we have the agent registered to speak to this item. We also have 5 other people registered to speak to it.
Very good, okay. Okay then, let's go to the agent. Good afternoon.
David Lang, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We hear you fine. Please state your name.
David Lang, 2100 Brewer Street West. I'm the agent for the application.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lang, you'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation to panel, and please proceed now.
Okay, if you could maybe just pull up the photos from my cover letter submitted back in March. That's it. So the variances we're asking for are mostly related to landscaping and the existing site conditions. As you're aware, a lot of the work has been already completed. Some of that work was part of a building permit dating back to 2016, which included reconstruction of the front steps. For various reasons, the existing configuration of the stairs was not permitted to be maintained. The owner had to rethink the main entrance in order to satisfy building code. Looking at some of the photos, you can see that the existing space on the front of the house is very restricted, and there are not a lot of options for creating proper access. During construction, the builder didn't think there was an issue with revising the plan, considering that many of the homes on the street all have identical conditions with stairs that project well over the property lines and butt up against the city sidewalk. For your reference, most of the photos in my cover letter are from houses on the same side of the street as 26 Bishop. One of the main challenges that is specific to 26 Bishop is that there's hardly any space to install any real landscaping to begin with. The front yard is mostly lost to the existing front vestibule and driveway. Essentially, rebuilding the staircase is not possible without the variances that we are asking for. Having said that, I believe the main issue with our application is more related to the landscaping conditions in the backyard. To clarify that the owner, Peter Simmerly, is the son of the original owner who bought the house in 1950. Peter's mother passed away several years ago, and Peter has been working on renovations since. Replacing the rear yard landscaping was not actually part of the original permit, but all of the existing patio stones had been in place for quite some time and were in need of replacement. Now referring to the site plan, you can see that the backyard is extremely small, part of which is taken up by the designated parking spot and driveway leading out to the street. Thank you. I recently had a fairly detailed conversation with Peter about the backyard, and he wanted to confirm that it had always been fully landscaped dating back to 1970. At that time, Peter's mother added the original patio stones mostly for functional reasons, but also to improve the natural drainage conditions. Apparently, Peter's mother and the previous neighbors had a mutual agreement that a lot of the storm water collecting around the house could be directed out to the street, since 26 Bishop has the space to allow for it on the existing driveway. The intention was to protect the homes from heavy rain, which is particularly problematic for older homes. One of the challenges with soft landscaping is that the city is asking homeowners to retain more water on their properties during rainstorms. In theory, this makes sense for the city's overall stormwater management plan. However, I was concerned that if Peter was asked to return the landscaping in the rear yard back to its original conditions prior to 1970, there could be a potential water issue, particularly for the neighbors. We believe that the total area of the rear yard is actually very minor, and any additional runoff onto city property would have little impact during heavy rainfalls. Essentially, we are asking to maintain the existing conditions, not just to be consistent with what has been there for almost 50 years, but to maintain a natural drainage condition that was actually meant to be protecting the existing homes. I should add that the new landscaping that was installed is semi-permeable, which would retain some of the water, but we understand that the variances for zero landscaping would still be required. Having said that, we are not aware of any objections from the Planning Department, the Heritage Department, or the Transportation and Works Department. In fact, Transportation has already issued an encroachment permit for the front vestibule, and we are in the process of having the agreement updated for the front steps. Lastly, I understand there has been a fair amount of correspondence from the parties on file. While most of the submitted letters are duplicates from the same groups, I have tried contacting many of them. Unfortunately, there was not a lot of contact information, so I haven't been able to have any real conversations about the application. Most of the submissions seem to share the same concerns relating to the landscaping. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and your consideration for approval would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Agent. Yes, just to go over that, the materials which the committee does have before it are the plans submitted by the applicant, covering letter. We have two previous Committee of Adjustment decisions from 2015, and we have a report from Heritage Preservation. We have a letter from Councillor Mike Layton. We have correspondence both in support and in opposition. In support, there's one letter from 35 Bishop, and in opposition we have correspondence from the following addresses on Bishop: 34, 24, another from 24, one from the ABC Residents Association, from 16 Bishop, 37, 22 Bishop, 33 Bishop, 21 Bishop, and 27 Bishop. So, let us move now to the first of the speakers registered in opposition. Moderator?
Mr. Chair, Peter SUMMERHILL is the next speaker registered for this item. We called and emailed him. He was here, but it looks like he isn't anymore.
That's the owner, I believe.
Sorry?
Peter SUMMERHILL, is that who you're asking about?
Yes.
Yeah, he's the owner. I told him I would be speaking on his behalf today. He was going to maybe give you a history of the property because he's been living there since the 1950s.
Okay. Well,
if you can get a hold of him.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. No, that's fine. You're speaking for him.
Corinne Barr is the next speaker
Corinne Barr.
registered. Corinne, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Hi, I actually had hoped that Catherine Bohr could be first, as she is the most impacted neighbor. Is that possible or not? I can go ahead.
That is possible. Thank you very much. It's a good idea. So we're going to go with Catherine Bohr,
Yeah.
moderator, who's the number 2 on our list.
Yep. Catherine, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Could you pull up my presentation, please? Thank you for the opportunity to address you today with my concerns. I know it's been a long day for the members of the committee. My name is Catherine Bohr. I have lived at 24 Bishop Street for 17 years, and my husband and I are neighbors most affected by the negative impacts of the bylaw violations. A variance shouldn't be granted for the front stairs nor for the backyard. The stairs were built without obtaining permission, even though the owner worked with 2 high-profile contractors who would have been aware of the bylaws, and there is a history of bylaw infractions with this property. Also, the owner didn't engage with his neighbors. While several houses on Bishop Street, as the agent has pointed out, have front stairs that encroach on city land, these were all built long before the bylaw was introduced, and there is no room for them to be built or rebuilt in any other way. On the contrary, that's not my presentation, actually. I have a PowerPoint presentation, if you could pull that up, please. On the contrary, 26 Bishop Street has ample room to build the stairs without encroachment, even when taking the vestibule into consideration, as the property has one of the widest frontages on the street at 25 feet wide versus the average 13 to 18. That's not my, oh, there we go. Okay, thank you very much. The stairs have been built and rebuilt 3 times due to various building code violations, but it is possible to conform with the bylaw. The second picture that you see in the middle depicts the first set of stairs built during the renovations. The configuration of the stairs did not encroach because they extended all the way across the front of the house before turning towards the street. If the current stone stairs, as seen in the third photo, had been built to extend all the way to the eastern edge of the house, they would not just be more aesthetically pleasing, but would avoid the need for encroachment. One might wonder why the applicant has a history of bylaw infractions and only after being caught decides to seek permission. We assume the owner doesn't want to build compliant stairs because he wants to accommodate his car, and he wishes to rent out his property with a parking spot not wide enough to accommodate most modern vehicles. If you could go to the next slide, please. The driveway measures a mere 2.2 meters, nowhere near the 3 meters required for the width of a driveway. The applicant was also denied a parking garage at a hearing in April 2015 because the space was too narrow. There has been damage done to our property as a result of vehicles parked there. And we've been told by the owner that he intends to rent out the house, and the rental ad on the left shows that the applicant intends to rent out his property with parking, which further exacerbates the potential for damage to our property. He has not been living there since the 1950s. If you go to the next slide, please. Whether the house is rented or occupied by the owner or family, leaving the stairs in their current configuration invites parking attempts that will lead to further damage to our property. You can see remnants of car paint on the fence post, and our fence has been dented. With the stairs configured in compliance with the bylaw, this sends a clear signal that a car shouldn't park there and also allows for more front yard landscaping. Since it's possible to build the stairs in compliance, there's only one reason the stairs were built in violation, and it's purely for the owner's convenience and personal gain. So I would like to ask the members of the committee to uphold the bylaw to help us protect our property. We also oppose the variance request to allow the backyard to remain 100% paved in. While the applicant maintains that prior to renovations, the backyard was extensively bricked in, and that this should entitle him to 0% soft landscaping, the renovation was an opportunity to bring nonconformities into compliance instead of blatantly violating the bylaw. Even a little softscaping, as was there before, is better than nothing at all. Instead, the applicant chose to make a mockery of Toronto's bylaws by violating regulations intended to mitigate the effects of ever more frequent and severe weather events. It's well known that hardscaping, even with semi-permeable materials, pushes water towards adjacent properties, and that softscaping helps prevent water from flowing directly towards a property or overwhelming our sewers. As the applicant's agent stated, the backyard was paved in 40 years ago because it was assumed that this would allow water to drain better in the property. But we assumed that the renovations at number 26 would have included waterproofing for his basement. Again, a renovation is an opportunity to bring previous nonconformities into modern day compliance, not an excuse to legalize outdated assumptions that are a half-century old. Since the renovations at 26, we have experienced water issues in our basement. You can see the water damage in the northwest corner of our basement, the corner which abuts the backyard of number 26. The owner of number 26 has denied us access to do any waterproofing work on that side of the house, so it's doubly difficult to protect ourselves from water running towards our house.
Ms. Boer, I'll ask you to make your final thoughts now, please.
There are also trees that are at jeopardy. If you move to the next slide, you will see those. I've been told by forestry department that they are at jeopardy of not getting enough water, and you can see how it's all paved in there. And the committee will forgive Bishop Street frustration, but we've been forced and faced with more than 6 years of construction headaches and repeated bylaw infractions that have negatively impacted our enjoyment of our homes for far too long. Our councillor and the ABC Residents Association are opposed, and there are 9 letters of objection on file. As a community member, I worry that the variances, if granted, will lead others to neglect their softscaping responsibilities in our neighborhood and beyond, and request that these variances be denied. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Panel members, do you have any questions for the speaker? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Moderator?
Corinne Barr, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Corinne Barr, and I have lived at 27 Bishop Street for 5 years. I'm the neighbor directly across the street from 26 Bishop, and have been exposed to an almost constant state of renovation at the property under discussion during that time. I will not reiterate the points already made by Ms. Boer. However, suffice it to say, I unequivocally support her position and that of other concerned neighbors, particularly as someone downhill from his property who is put at risk due to the complete absence of floodwater control measures at the site. I will instead be taking the lens of a board member of the ABC Residents Association, a volunteer organization serving the residents of Yorkville and Midtown, and focus my comments on the broader issues this file raises regarding the owner's complete disregard for community collaboration and due process. I can personally attest that the owner of 26 Bishop Street is yet to attempt to engage with me, one of the most affected on the street, or the ABCRA to explain these most recent changes to the property. Not only did he not engage with his neighbors on his plans, he proceeded with this most recent work without the requisite permits. It should be noted that the applicant had ample opportunity to formally outline these variances in 2 previous Committee of Adjustment applications in 2015 that dealt with renovations to the building, which were reviewed by the ABCRA, but he chose not to do so. The only overture I've received was via the ABCRA general email box from his agent, Mr. Lang, on Wednesday of last week. Immediately following that overture, I offered via email on behalf of the ABCRA to speak to them about our concerns. However, they elected to ignore that offer. As you are likely aware, the ABC Residents Association is a volunteer organization committed to enhancing the quality of life in our neighborhood through active participation in municipal issues. We maintain as a board that the owner of number 26 Bishop Street has not operated in good faith, nor exhibited community-mindedness or respect for city bylaws, and in fact has shown a flagrant disregard for all. The only reason we are having this discussion is because concerned neighbors highlighted these issues to the city. Not only are these variances not minor, nor desirable for the appropriate development and or use of the land and or building, and do not appear to uphold the general intent and purpose of the city zoning code, but we believe will have a deleterious impact on the neighborhood, and perhaps even more worryingly would allow future such individuals to take advantage by pointing to these already approved deviations, or to take the same approach as this applicant has of ignoring the permitting process to further denigrate the integrity of the bylaw system and the sensitive evolution of the community they are designed to support. It is on these grounds that we ask that you not approve any of the proposed variances in this file and request immediate remediation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Questions, panel members? Okay. Again, hearing none, we'll go to moderator for the next speaker.
Mr. Chair, Susanna Velasquez is the next speaker registered for this item. We called her and emailed her, but looks like she's joined. So the next speaker registered is Sylvia Schumacher. Sylvia, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So panel members, please, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking in opposition to the proposed variances for 26 Bishop Street. My name is Sylvia Schumacher. I live at 37 Bishop Street and a long-term resident of Bishop Street, so I am very familiar with the 6 years and counting of renovations at number 26.
Okay, please may I ask you for the record, just to state your name.
Sylvia Schumacher.
Thank you. Good evening. Proceed.
Thank you. I underscore the concerns voiced by Ms. Bohr and Ms. Barr regarding the driveway and the hardscaping of the backyard. I will be making 3 points today. Point number 1, I would like to address the variances sought in respect of the soft scaping requirements for the front yard. Those are variances number 4 and 5 on the public hearing notice. The front yard is 13 feet long by just under 3 feet wide, which excludes the stairs and the driveway. It is entirely hardscaped at this moment. Even the downspout empties to a hard surface, ensuring that any rainwater drains onto the sidewalk and then into the sewer system, which you will find in the photograph appended to my letter of opposition, which I believe is on the screen right now. There you go. That is current, and I took that photograph this week. So complying with the bylaw would provide soft scaping to absorb rainwater and melting snow and keep it out of Toronto's sewer system. The city presumably determined that this is desirable when they passed these chapters of the bylaw. Point number 2, Mr. Simmerle has never engaged with the neighbors regarding his renovations, not even in terms of managing our expectations during this lengthy renovation process. It would have been a very simple matter to engage. He knows the long-term residents, he literally knows us by name, and he knows our addresses, so he knows who lives where. His mother owned and lived at 26 Bishop Street for decades before Peter inherited the house. Point number 3, you know what, I actually like to loop back to a point that his agent made. saying that Peter has lived in the house since the 1950s, that is frankly a flagrant misrepresentation. His mother has lived there since the 1950s until her death a few years ago. Peter moved out as an adult. I have lived on Bishop Street for 15 years and Ms. Bohr for 17 years, and Mr. Simmerle has never lived in that property since then. His own children are in their 20s or 30s, and he has not lived there during those decades. So just to correct that misrepresentation. Point number 3, Mr. Simmerle went ahead with the renovations without first seeking the proper variances, knowing and in flagrant disregard for the city's due process and the neighbor's opportunity to object. For these reasons, I respectfully request that the panel rejects the variances sought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Panel members, questions of the speaker? Okay. And moderator, where does that leave us? So we've heard from all those we can get in touch with. Thank you for that. Okay. So we'll go back now to the agent. And agent, you've heard the speakers. Concern with respect to the hardscaping. Their feeling is that it does not achieve the goal that you were commenting on of diverting the water in a good direction, that it's diverting the water in ways that are damaging to their properties. And they've asked us not to approve. So we'd ask for your comments, please.
Okay, I'll try and address most of those comments they made. With regards to the water, and what I was saying in my previous presentation, was that the whole point of the soft landscaping is for retaining water in your soil during rainfalls. And it makes sense to not overload the city's infrastructure. But it also doesn't make sense for a lot of these older homes. And I'm thinking particularly for 24 Bishop. I think when Peter took out the existing landscaping that was there was some rain, and it obviously impacted their home before they could put the landscaping back. And the way Peter described it to me was that the agreement that his mother had with the previous owners was that it was in everybody's best interest simply to facilitate that water shedding down to the front of the property. I can't really comment on the trees. It didn't come up with urban forestry. I can say that with regards to the parking, that's not really area that we can landscape. There really is no space in the front of the property to landscape. That driveway is legal non-conforming, dating back to the original construction of the home. And like many homes in Toronto, it's really tight, and it's not the best spot for a car, but that is the case. It was addressed on the original Committee of Adjustment application, and it didn't come up on this application. And the whole reason that the stair is over a little bit from the corner of the house is really just to be able to open the door when you're actually in the driveway. But that driveway, technically, that space extends all the way to the back of the property, where I guess that would be the designated parking spot at the back, even though you've got that whole driveway. I'm trying to remember some of the other comments they were asking about. I should mention that the street was widened at some point, which is probably what exacerbated a lot of the setback issues on the front of the properties. I noticed that one of the neighbors pointed out that there was a whole bunch of landscaping that we could have done directly in front of the vestibule. The problem is that's city property, so it would have had no impact on the calculated variances we're asking for. I guess in theory, we could probably put a planter in the corner of the stairs, but I'm not sure if that would be addressing the intention of the soft landscaping bylaw. In the rear, I know that shortly after Peter's mother did landscape the backyard, there was some perimeter gardening put on top of what was there. If the zero landscaping is it just seems, you know, egregious on paper. I suppose we could propose, you know, like a 24-inch strip of landscaping to be installed across the back. But again, I come back to my point where I'm just concerned about water retention in the soil affecting the neighbors' houses on either side. Like, I know, for example, the owner to the right at 24 Bishop, they still have their downspouts connected to the city underground lines, which I believe they were supposed to be disconnected, but I worry that that's maybe also exacerbating whatever potential water issues they have. Otherwise, the stairs that were built at the front, it is tricky trying to get a legal staircase in there. That wood staircase that they had originally installed, you can see from the photos that it was not functional, and it certainly didn't comply with building code, which is why they were asked to take it out. It might be it's probably in one of the letters from 24 Bishop. And so the staircase that was eventually put in there was really meant to satisfy building code, knowing that there's a consistent condition all up and down the street. And like a lot of those stairs, like that's 24 Bishop there. They step off their step onto the sidewalk. And they got the concrete landing there. Like their whole front yard, other than the garden where we have a vestibule, is the same condition. I guess we're just asking to be able to install the stair similar to what other people have, so we can have proper access. Otherwise, I'm not sure how people would get into the house other than making the principal entrance on the back, but that's not ideal. I feel that the staircase that's there is consistent with what's on the street, other than the fact that trying to fit in some landscaping in the really limited area that's there is not really possible.
Thank you very much.
I mean, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Any questions, panel members? I'll begin with my question, which relates to minor variance number 5. Minor variance number 5 is worded that in this case, 36% of the required front yard landscape open space will be in the form of soft landscaping. There was one photograph which was taken, I think, by the neighbor, Catherine Bohr, showed the entire, what looked to me like the entire front yard landscaping area as paved over or stoned over. So is that how did I miss that 36% that apparently is soft landscaping?
Well, if you go to the photo, now I should clarify that item was 0.36 when I applied to committee, and the zoning examiner with discussions with somebody updated it. And I believe it was for the assumption that a planter could be installed sort of in the nook of the staircase, which if you calculate the available front yard area to landscape, it's very small. You have to eliminate the driveway, you have to eliminate the front vestibule, and all that's left is a little strip on the left leading up this left side of the house, and that little space next to the stairs, because you take out the stairs as well. And of that, I guess they felt if there was some sort of a planter or tree, that would satisfy that 36%. It didn't make sense to me, but they were adamant that that was how they were interpreting the plan.
Thank you. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you. It helps.
A planter doesn't count as soft landscaping.
Thank you, Madam.
Well, I agree with you. I'm sort of circling back to the zoning examiner's interpretation here. I didn't show any landscaping on the plan, even though they have suggested that there's 36%. And I think it's because they've concluded that the available front yard area for landscaping is really, really small. So maybe the strip up the left side of the house is the 36%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
I just can't understand how you get into this house before this.
So the picture on the left.
Right, so prior to renovation.
Right, so that staircase was there long time ago, and it was proposed to be replaced, but for various different reasons, that was not permitted to be rebuilt. And that being the case, we had to install something that was building code compliant, which means putting a landing in, which is sort of where you end up with what we've got there. Now, I know that those risers are not at the minimum. Like if you're going to be installing stairs, to have an easier stair to walk up is a preference, but you've got the landing at the top, and then you've got the landing in the middle, and then the stairs going down to grade.
So your neighbor is saying that some of your construction has been done without a permit, and is this staircase in this picture illegal, or is that something that you built illegally?
That version, the version on the right, was not submitted for a permit revision until after it was built.
But the one on the right is...
That's the current.
Is the current one.
Yeah. So there was a proposal to rebuild the staircase, but due to site conditions and other factors, it was not accepted.
Did you stretch the picture? That's why it looks wider on that encroaching. Because I thought they are two different locations. I just realized that they are this. So it's the same window.
Same house.
Same house. Yeah, same house, but at the front.
So
what I'm trying to say is your encroachment is the same as before. It's just that you make the landing wider.
So the stair on the left, oh, it's gone. The stair on the left is the original staircase. Right. You step off of that onto the walkway and you go out to the sidewalk. So there's in fact no encroachment by the stairs. The only thing that was encroaching was the vestibule.
I see.
Then they get a permit to rebuild the stairs and they build that wood staircase, but there was a bunch of code issues with that staircase and they were forced to rebuild it. So going back to the drawing board and after you looked at what everybody else had on the street, and you'd have to go back. If you go back and look at all the photos that I provided, you'll see that a lot of, in my cover letter, this is it here.
Right. Do you mind going back to the last picture where we have all these free staircase? I just want to know because I was a bit confused. Yeah, the last image where we have free staircase.
Yeah. Okay.
So the one on the left was before. The one in the middle is you've got an approval from the previous COA decision, but then you just build it without a building permit, and that's the reason why you build it with all these wrong height and issues. And then you got an inspector coming over. Then you decided to build it without another permit again, and then turns out this time you need another variance, which is why you're here today. Am I right?
Close. That staircase, we did have approval to build it. There was adjustments.
The one in the middle, you have approval to build it, okay?
We had approval to build it, but the final product, because of, and you know, if you've ever worked with building inspectors before, they come out with the tape and they want to make sure everything's perfect. The risers were a little tall, the treads were a little short. We tried to jam it in and it just didn't quite work. And they were forced to have to rethink how they were going to provide a proper staircase. So they went up and down the street and they looked at all the existing conditions. And to answer your question, I think, yes, they built the staircase that's on the right without actually applying for a permit revision first.
Okay.
I see.
Does that help?
I see, I get it now. So the staircase that is already on site now, which is right on the third picture or on the right side.
Correct.
This staircase meets the building code requirement after the railing is installed, I believe, but it doesn't meet the variance again. So you basically should have just get a proper consultant to do it for you from the beginning. Then, well, anyway, now you're here, so okay, I see the problem now.
Wait a second. Now I'm confused. So I'll just ask this question. We have to move into our committee.
Okay.
What exists today? What we're being asked to legalize is the photograph on the right, which was built without a permit. Was built without a permit. Why do we think? Do we or do we not think that it is compliant? would it have been granted a permit or not? Do we know that, or do we not know that? As far as, what do we know for certain about the staircase on the right, which is the existing, in terms of compliance or conformity?
What we know about the staircase that's there now, the one on the right, is that it's building code compliant, and that's the way it was. The reason it was built like that. But to answer the question is, it was not submitted for the actual permit revision, so we found out later that it was not zoning compliant.
It's not zoning compliant.
You do know that, let's say, if we approve your variance here, you still need to prepare the building permit package and get this staircase with a building permit attached. You understand that, right? This zoning variance doesn't mean that this staircase is okay.
No, absolutely. We need to go back and finish off the process.
We don't guarantee your staircase will meet the code, because you might have to, and this is why I'm a little bit worried for you, because you might, let's say you get an approval today, but the staircase again doesn't meet the building code requirement, because you are only surveying how other people were doing the staircase.
Okay, I'm going to stop the discussion there and move into, take the discussion into committee, please.
Okay.
And so committee, I think you see what we're facing with, what we're faced here with. Just to remind committee on these matters where we're being asked to legalize something that was built without permit, we're not a punitive body. What we are to do is to consider whether what we're being asked to approve, whether we would have approved it had it not been built. Where are we being approached to look at an application that was proposed? That's the way we have to view these matters. So we're not a punitive body, but that's the framework in which we must look at it. So let's hear some comments on this one, because it is complicated. Go ahead, Mr. Byatt.
Just looking at the various the variances that are requested, I have difficulty with variance number 1. You know, the 0% of the rear yard being maintained as soft landscaping. I'm not satisfied with the explanation that suggests that the soil, had it been soft landscaping, that the soil would be saturated at the point where it would affect their neighbors. So that's one. Variance number 3, similarly, the idea of the stairs located 0 meters from the south lot line, I also find that a bit problematic. Number 4, you know, it says minimum of 50% of the front yard is required to be landscaping. In this case, 48% of the front yard will be maintained. I'm not quite sure how that 48% comes about. When I look at the images, I don't see a 48%, and similarly, I think with number 5. So I have difficulty with those variance the requests.
Thank you. Further comment, please.
I have concerns with respect to the rear yard landscaping. I don't understand the submissions that, or I'm not swayed by the submissions that hardscaping is preferable to softscaping. With respect to the front stairs, you know, that parking spot was not approved in a previous variance. I think that, you know, moving the stairs a little further to the corner would allow it to be set back. Having said that, I recognize through the submissions that there are many other examples in the neighborhood of setbacks that are similar. With respect to the front landscaping, although there's very little space, you know, look like what, 0.44 meters of soft landscaping. There is still a little corner, you know, in between the stairs, and there's a little bit in front, and you could put a little bit in the side. There is an opportunity to put some softscaping at the front, where currently it's all hardscaped and we're being asked to accept that there's no other alternative there. And I think although the space is limited, I think there is some ability, and planters don't qualify as soft landscaping.
Thank you. Any further comment?
I'll just weigh in. In a nutshell, I'm quite fine with the stairs. I think, you know, if you look at many of the facades along that strip, they're all of similar nature. They're all right up to the sidewalk, and frankly, if the applicant has to get building code approval for it, I think that satisfies my concern about safety, and I think it's a little bit nitpicky to you know, deal with, to make them removed. I thought from a safety perspective they look like they're quite fine, quite adequate, and quite in keeping with the character of the street. I agree with my colleagues about particularly about the rear landscaping. There's no way we should be approving anything that comes even close to zero. That is just unacceptable and is inconsistent with how we deal with properties elsewhere in the city. So I'm quite uncomfortable with the rear landscape. I think if we can figure out a reasonable way to deal with the front, again, it's a very narrow strip. I mean, it seems to me we're kind of nitpicking on the front side. I think when we really want to get some impact on making a change here, we should be focusing on the rear yard, and you know, I think refusing the variance. I think it's number 1 for the rear yard landscaping. That would be my suggestion.
And I think, as I said, like the front, it's so minimal, it's 0.44 square meters. So there's not much you can do there at all.
I'd agree.
Mr. Chang.
Okay, so I basically agree with Larry's. Is exactly what I was thinking. That's why I was asking more about the staircase, because I have no plan to agree with the interlocking at the back, or agreeing the logic that interlocking is going to be better than soil. That is anti-science. So I wouldn't recommend approving number 1, but I am okay with the staircase since there will be building code review later on. I also understand that it's quite impossible to put any landscape at the front, given the lot and given the vestibule is already built out. So I'm okay with that.
Thank you. Okay. I share everyone's concern with respect to the rear. I can't support variance number 1. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that 4 and 5 both suggest existing, right? We're being asked to legalize something here. And 4 and 5 both suggest percentages that I think, as Mr. Bayat pointed out, I felt the same way. I don't see those percentages in evidence with respect to a request to legalize. But where we too approve everything here except for number 1, then those would be what the applicant would be required to produce. So let's move to a motion then, and
sure, I'll move a motion, Chair, just to that effect. I think, again, as we've discussed, I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about the front. I think we should focus on the rear. So I move a motion to refuse variance number 1 and to approve variances 2, 3, 5. There are no other conditions.
2, 3, 4, and 5, correct?
Correct.
Is there a second to that
I'm going
motion?
to defer to the bylaw review that they know what they're looking at with respect to the front.
Second by Ms. Hayes. Okay. It is moved and seconded to approve the application with the elimination of minor variance 1, to which is to be refused. Variances 2, 3, 4, and 5 to be approved. All those in favor? Show of hands, please. Those opposed? Mr. Bayat is opposed. And the motion is carried, and the application is approved as described. The panel moves on to the next item, which is item number 30, 98 Summerhill. And on this application, the panel has before it applicant's materials. We have a report from Transportation Services. There's a staff report from Urban Forestry. There is correspondence both in support and in opposition. We have correspondence in support from 81 Woodlawn and from 108-321 Carlisle. Also from 37 Summerhill Gardens. We have opposition from 108 Shaftesbury, 107 Summerhill, and 118 Shaftesbury. And moderator, could you tell us, so that's our, on this application, do we have any speakers in opposition registered?
Mr. Chair, we have a speaker who's registered in support.
In support? Okay, so if we only have the speaker registered in support, then a presentation is not required. Let's ask panel members if panel would like to hear a presentation, or whether you have questions to put to the applicant. Just think about that. Perhaps first we can go to the person. Is the person who wants to speak in support standing by?
Yeah, hi, Robert McCackey, applicant, architect.
Sorry, the agent or the person registered in support?
Okay, we have the agent standing by.
We'll leave both, yeah.
And we have the person in support. Okay, well, let's go first to the person in support.
Okay. So Stephen Job, you've been unmuted, you can go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Stephen Job, and I'm the property owner and resident of 81 Woodlawn Avenue East, which is at the far east end of Woodlawn. Our street is connected to Summerhill Ave by a very short pedestrian path, and so my house is about 5 houses away from 98 Summerhill. I'm also a professional planner. I'm here to speak in support of this very reasonable application, and I want to cover just a few topics. The first is the topic of converting a single-family home into a duplex, which I only raised because several of the letters from other neighbors have raised it. I think this is completely appropriate for multiple reasons. First of all, it's allowed. No variance is required to create a duplex. Second of all, I think it's appropriate to increase housing options so close to higher order transit. There's a subway station under 500 meters away from this entire neighborhood pocket. This is exactly the right location to be allowing modest increases in housing. Third, the proposed duplex is consistent with the neighborhood context. As all of our neighbors know, there are many existing duplexes in our neighborhood. This is a common housing form in Summerhill. So in my view, the duplex conversion is a non-issue. Second is the topic of height. According to the application plans, the current height of the dwelling is 3 stories and 9.3 meters. The proposed height is 3 stories and 9.9 meters, a very minor increase. And as shown in the package, the next door house at 96 Summerhill is even slightly taller than the proposed new height of 98 Summerhill. There are at least 6 other examples of taller houses that have been approved at committee. And I also want to point out to the committee, there are a number of much older, tall 3-story houses in this area that probably predate the requirement for these variances. So this tall 3-story house form is very common and widespread in this neighborhood. And so in my view, height is also not an issue. Third is the topic of parking. Many properties in this neighborhood have 0 parking and street parking only. This proposal has 1 parking spot in the boulevard, meaning technically it's on city property, but it looks like front yard parking and it's licensed. This is a very normal condition in Summerhill, close to the subway, walking distance from amenities like parks, retail, schools, and so on. And so I think it's appropriate to only have 1 parking space. And if at some point in the future a resident wants to apply for another parking space as on-street parking, They can go through the same process as all of us, including being on the wait list and not getting a permit if there's no space available. So in my view, the parking provision is also not an issue. Fourth, and I think I have to give credit to the applicant here, they've taken a lot of care to not change the front elevation of this house. The elevation design will stay broadly the same with a small change to the roof line. And I want to point out that this is kind of a rundown house right now. It's not in great shape, which is actually what drew my attention to this application and why I'm speaking in favor. I think it's great that someone has the courage and determination to take the ugly duck on the street and convert it into an attractive, newly renovated home for two households. So I want to say thank you to the applicant for helping us raise the standard in this neighborhood. So in summary, I think this proposal is completely in keeping with the context, which has many three-story houses, many duplexes, many properties with only one front yard car parking, and is clearly in line with numerous precedents on the other variances requests. It obviously complies with the intent of the OP and the zoning bylaw, and I think the variances are minor. And in my opinion, as a neighbor, the application is desirable because it will upgrade an ugly old house, increase housing options near transit, and it's an appropriate land use. And lastly, I want to call the committee's attention to the professionalism and proactive nature that this applicant has shown, including reaching out to neighbors well in advance, making himself available to answer questions by email or on Zooms, putting together a very professional application package, generally being very friendly and courteous to everyone he's spoken with. Even reduced the scope of the proposed renovation, I think, in response to some comments from neighbors, I'm not sure. But that's not something you normally see in an application. So I notice all of this, I appreciate it, and I look forward to welcoming the applicant and their family as neighbors to this wonderful part of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any questions for the speaker, panel members? Okay, let's go now to the agent, please.
Robert McCatchy.
Robert McCatchy, agent.
Good evening. Panel members, do you wish a presentation on this application? Do you have any questions to bring to the applicant? No? In that case, we have no registered speakers in opposition, but just to note them, the letters in opposition we received were 3. 2 of them take issue with the fact that this will be a duplex, and there's also concern about FSI and parking. So if I could put those questions to the agent. Agent, we don't require a presentation from you, but could you address the issue of the fact that you're proposing a duplex and that the FSI exceeds what the bylaw permits?
So to do with FSI parking and the duplex use?
Yes.
I mean, the duplex is, as was said by the previous person in support, permitted use in the area. And then with regards to parking, this is a licensed front yard parking space in the city of Toronto. It's currently being transferred to the current owners, which bought this property last year. There is a note on the file with the C of A from transportation to prove that. Again, we're 500 meters from the Summerhill subway station. We've included a bicycle parking spot at the front of the house. With regards to density, if you refer to sheet A002 in our submitted drawings, we've outlined a table just showing how our density compares to similar properties adjacent to us. And you can see that there's precedent for exceeding or similar density that we're proposing.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, panel, for the applicant? In that case, if we're ready to move to a motion, let's proceed. Mr. Bayek, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking through the requested variances and the fact that duplexes are allowed in this vicinity, I have no hesitation in supporting the requested variances as asked for. I think they're all within keeping and all reasonable. So it's an application that I would be quite happy to support.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Chang. So it is moved and seconded to
There's a
approve.
condition there, isn't there, Chair? Did you get the condition?
Sorry, there's a forestry condition number 2. Thank you, Mr. Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Clay. Okay, it is moved and seconded to approve, subject to forestry. All those in favor, show of hands. And the motion is carried unanimously, and the application is approved, subject to forestry. Panel moves to number 31, 106 GLENAYR Road. And on this application, we have only before us the materials submitted by the applicant. And do we have the agent with us, moderator?
Mr. Chair, we have the agent, Pedram Nadaf. Pedram, you've been unmuted, you can go ahead.
Yes, please. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, the member of the committee, can you hear me?
We do hear you. Just stand by for a moment, please.
Sure.
If you will. I want to ask the moderator, do we have a party in opposition registered to speak?
Mr. Chair, we do have somebody registered. We've called them and emailed them, but it doesn't look like they're with us.
So you haven't been able to make contact?
No.
You've been trying to do so?
Yep.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind trying again while we're talking to the agent, and if you do make contact, let me know.
Sure.
Okay. Panel members, on this application, do you have questions for the applicant? Would you like to hear a presentation? Mr. Clay, go ahead.
I'll defer to Joanne. She's probably got the same question I have.
Go ahead, Ms. Hayes.
Go ahead, Larry. You go ahead.
I was just, what just leaps out at me on this application are the 2 variances with respect to length and depth, and I wonder if you could speak to that. That seems quite a bit over what's permitted.
Okay, sure. Item number 2 and 3, I believe you are referring to.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Just as an explanation, the building length is 17 meters, and the number you can see on the zoning notice is referring to the basement, the structure in a basement. That's why it's exceed the allowable length we have. It is below grade. It is a structure below grade, not above grade. That's why the building length and building depth is exceeded more than allowable depth and length.
Yeah, that's helpful. That explains it. It just seemed unusual to be that much over, but that explains it. Thank you.
No problem.
And so that was my exact question, because I saw that the site statistics show the length as 18.06 and the depth at 19.35. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just check again with the moderator. Moderator, any luck on contacting that person?
Yes, Mr. Chair, they joined for 30 seconds and they hung up, so it looks like they're no longer interested.
Okay. So we have tried but unsuccessfully to make contact with Janet and Alex Henry. So we're assuming that we cannot make the contact with them. And in that case, panel members, unless there are further questions, we could move to a motion, please.
Chair, having received that confirmation and explanation from the applicant with respect to the depth, I believe that what's being requested is not out of character with the area, and I would be prepared to support the application, but I would want to tie it to plans because of the depth. variances, and I don't want any confusion with respect to the structure above ground.
Thank you. And that's seconded by Mr. Clay. So there is a motion seconded to approve the application tied to plan. All those in favor? Show of hands, please. Motion is carried unanimously, and the application is so approved. Panel moves to number 32, which is 126 Montrose. On this application, we have before us applicant's materials. We have correspondence in support from Kristen Thornson at 113 Montrose and C.I. Chen at 124 Montrose. So, moderator, do we have the agent with us here?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have Graham Day, who's the registered agent.
Okay. Good evening.
Mr. Day, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead. Graham Day? Graham, we're going to try giving you a call if you can hear us. We can't hear you at all.
Hello, yes, this is Graham Day, the applicant on behalf of the homeowners.
We hear you, Mr. Day. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. So panel, we have no registered opposition on this application. Would you like a presentation, or do you have questions for Mr. Day? We do. Oh, we do have a, okay, I didn't see it. Apparently there is a registered caller in opposition. Okay. Two. All right then. In that case, Mr. Day, we will ask you for a presentation, and you'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Please proceed now.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Again, this is Graham Day, the applicant on behalf of the homeowner. I am the designer as well on the job. So we have a single-family dwelling here, semi-detached to a neighbor, and we are just looking to do a second floor addition on top of the existing main floor addition previously, extending to mirror, if you will, the attached neighbor. That's really all we're doing. I believe we're in consistency with the rest of the neighborhood. If you look on Google Earth, not really out of place here, even though we are exceeding the floor area ratio and the building depth. I think we're still in line with the neighboring properties, and I believe everything is minor in nature. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the registered speakers that are standing by. Excuse me.
Veronica Madonna, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Great, thanks.
Speaker, I'll ask you to state your name for the record, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here for 100 Colbeck, the next application.
I'm sorry.
Okay then. Thank you. That's okay. Just keep standing by. Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry.
Okay. So our error there. There are no speakers in opposition for 126 Montrose. So returning to you, panel members. Are there any questions of Mr. Day? Are we ready for a motion? Mr. Byatt, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to move and bring forward a motion to approve as is, I think, bringing his home, this application brings that home into conformity with his neighbor, which is great, and it adds the additional space needed. So I'll be very happy to just move a motion for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second to Mr. Byatt's motion? Second by Ms. Hayes. It is moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor, show of hands. And the motion is carried by a unanimous vote. The application is approved. And at this point, we move to 100 Colbeck, item number 33. And on this one, I think we know that there is a registered speaker standing by in opposition, so let's go to the agent first, please.
Interesting, Mr. Chair. Just to note, the speaker in opposition, Catherine Clark, tried calling and emailing, but haven't had any luck.
So there's just the one speaker?
That's right, yeah. Veronica, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Veronica Madonna. I'm the agent and the architect on behalf of the owners. I just wanted to thank Mr. Chair and the members of the committee for allowing me to speak today on behalf of this proposal.
Well, we're glad to hear from you, and you'll have 5 minutes to present your application. Please proceed.
Great, thank you. So the initial proposal that we have here today is for a third-story addition, plus infilling the existing porch with interior space. Since the application, our client no longer wishes to build the third-story addition, which will eliminate a number of our variances and also reduce some of our variances. So if I may, I'd like to request an amendment to our application and just speak a little bit about what the plans are.
Okay,
so just
Veronica, this
yes?
is important. Then, if you're going to remove some of the variances, let's go through very carefully. Go through the notice, and if you could refer to them by number, please. The ones that you're removing. Let's get that down first. Then we can proceed.
Absolutely.
Okay. So carry
Great,
on.
So I'll maybe just carry on into the variances and go number by number and speak to which ones we're revising.
No, I'd rather you went through the entire list of variances and to say this one is removed, that one's removed. Let's do that first in summary.
Great.
Then we can go back to the ones that remain for your comments and explanations.
Okay, perfect. So the ones that are being removed is variance number 2, which relates to the maximum permitted building height is 10 meters, and our proposal was 11.64. We would like to remove this variance.
Don't have to explain why, just take it out. Okay, but which other ones are we taking out?
Variance number 3, which is relating to the side exterior main wall.
Yes, anything else?
We would like to revise variance number 4, which is relating to floor space index.
Okay, you're going to revise that. Will this?
Yes.
Will that revision? Is that going to change any of your submitted drawings?
It will change the elevations and it will change the submitted drawings because we are no longer planning to build the 3rd floor.
Okay then, so Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer?
Yes?
Okay, so we're into a situation here where the applicant would like to remove 2 variances, but revise downward another variance relating to FSI. Do we have any difficulty with doing that, or should we defer in order to allow this to be done?
It's up to the committee whether you want to consider the revisions. Part of the issue with that is that neighbors and the committee members themselves will not get to see how this will change the plans. You can't tie it to plans. because you don't get to see what the new design will look like.
Right. Okay, well, let's go back to the applicant then. Let her finish her quick summary of which variances she's removing. Applicant, with respect to variance number 4, if you could please just give me the new numbers. Right now you're at 0.89 request for FSI. What does the 0.89 become in your revision?
The point, so our FSI that we submitted was 1.41, as according to the variance.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm doing something wrong here. I beg your pardon. My mistake, and let me catch up with you. Okay.
No problem. And our proposal would be 1.12.
1.12. 1.41 becomes 1.12. Thank you.
Yes.
What is that in square meters?
So square meters, are you looking for the total
Yes.
GFA?
Right now it's
Okay,
showing
yeah.
is, you submitted at 268.44 meters squared. We need the revision to go with
Okay, so the
1.12.
the total GFA revised would be 212.55 meters squared.
212.55 meters squared. Thank you. Okay, are there any further deletions or revisions to your list?
No further deletions or revisions, thank you.
Okay. All right then.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. Should the purpose of the application also have a revision? It currently states constructing a 3rd-story addition.
Good point. Thank you very much. Applicant?
Yes, we should revise that. We no longer wish to construct a 3rd-story addition.
So the revised wording would read,
To alter the existing 2-story detached dwelling by constructing a front 2-story addition.
thank you. Staff, okay. All right then,
Excuse me, Chair, wouldn't variance number 7 be deleted as well? The variance to the 43886?
applicant, the question there is, by taking off the 3rd story, does that not, how does that impact variance number 7?
Yes, my apologies. It would also delete variance number 7, which is a repeat of the height variance number 2.
Very good. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a quick question? I don't know where you are in the proceedings, but in the absence of having a 3rd story, you're still putting on a front addition. I mean, we don't have the benefit now of seeing what the front elevation would look like. Is it simply what you had before without the 3rd story?
It will be revised slightly. I did submit a supporting document with a rendered elevation. It was, however, late. If I may ask for to put it up on the screen so you can see it, I would appreciate that.
There it is.
No, there's another document. It's the file is called supporting documentation.
If it was submitted late, the committee members do not have that in front of them today.
Okay. If I'm not able to show it as well, then I can just explain that it will resemble the proposal, which was included in the package. It would just not contain the 3rd story addition. So if we could please go to the proposed elevation that we see in this package. This one here. So it would resemble this elevation in the front. It would be a two-story front addition, which is infilling the existing porch line for the additional space our client needs for their home. We would be removing that third story, and the existing roof line that is to the rear would remain, and we would come into it with the flat roof in the front. We would be looking to articulate the front elevation so that there is a recessed entrance into the house, and we would be looking to provide material that complements the neighboring, which would include stone and brick, and perhaps some.
Okay, so what we're dealing with here is a substantial revision, and I'm going to take this now into committee with the panel. I'm concerned that we can't deal with this application now because the revision is so substantial, even though I understand that it is leading to a less severe application. It's so substantially different now that I don't know that we're going to understand what we're voting on, nor do I know whether those who are registered to speak in opposition will know where their concerns lie in the revision. So any other comments on that?
Chair, I would agree with that. I think that given the initial report from planning and the degree of opposition with respect to this proposal, certainly it's great that the applicant has listened to some of those concerns and tried to revise their proposal. However, we and they have no opportunity to really see what's being proposed, and I think out of fairness, it should be recirculated, and it may be that with the reduced variances, they may not have the opposition that they currently do, but who knows? So I don't think we should deal with it today.
Other thoughts, panel members?
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I'm sitting here trying to visualize what the new build would look like from the agent's description. I just can't do it, and if we can, I can't imagine that the neighborhoods would. And so, and even things like it's flat roof for a certain portion of the front, then it elevates into a pitched roof. I don't think we have. I think Joanne's right. I don't think we have enough information available to us to be able to render an objective decision.
I'm of that same mind. So an application to that effect, or pardon me, a motion to that effect to allow, well, I'll look to panel members for a motion to...
I would move a motion to defer the application to allow for recirculation of revised notice reflecting the updated variances.
Is there a second to that motion? It is seconded by Mr. Byers.
And to submit the revisions with our office, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
So it is moved and seconded to defer for the reasons just described. All those in favor, show of hands, please. And that motion is carried and the application is deferred.
So for Catherine Clark, who was waiting to speak on this item, she'll have another opportunity when we re-notify for this application.
Indeed. Thank you, Catherine, for waiting, and you've heard the proceedings and how the committee got to this point. Very good. With that, the panel moves on to number 34. 249 Keele Street. On this application, we're looking at the applicant's materials. We have correspondence from community planning of city planning. We have staff reports from community planning and from engineering and construction. We have correspondence in interest or concern from 243 Keele, and we have opposition correspondence from 378 Indian Grove, 374 Indian Grove, and 376 Indian Grove.
Mr. Chair, we have Ian Cunha. Ian, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Good, we do hear you, Ian. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Ian Cunha. I'm representing Tony Palermo, the owner of 249 Keele Street.
Very good. Just stand by for a moment, please. We do have speakers in opposition.
To Mr. Chair.
So, Ian, I'll ask you to make your presentation to the panel. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead now.
Yes, sir. I would just like to give you a small explanation why this project is before you. On April the 12th, 2019, we applied to the city for a zoning application review for a laneway suite. 2 weeks later, we received a certificate saying that we complied with the zoning bylaw. On May the 28th, 2019, we applied for a building permit, and we were issued a building permit on July the 30th, 2019. During the demolition of the existing garage, the city inspector told the owner that because the rear lane was not considered a city driveway, we had to stop. Since August 2019, the city's legal department and my client's lawyer have been trying to figure out how to resolve this problem. Because according to the zoning examiner, he went by the book, got his superiors to review the application, and everyone agreed that even though the laneway was not paved, because we're not using the laneway to access this laneway suite, the permit was issued, so the zoning certificate was issued, the permit was issued. This laneway suite application also improved the property. All hard surfaces in the backyard will be replaced by soft landscaping, which is required by the laneway suite bylaw. I have gone back to the zoning examiner, Nelson Rodriguez, and he assured me that the review was done properly, and that according to him, the permit, which by the way is still active, was properly achieved. Right now, because the city is not treating the rear lane as a city driveway, even though it accesses 3 other properties, including 243, which I have spoken with the neighbors at 243 yesterday, and I told them exactly what we were doing, and they actually were satisfied that we are not going to block any part of the existing laneway. I read the reports from transportation and planning. In regards to planning, we agree to tie any decisions to the committee application approval, if there is one. And as far as the transportation, because we do have a building permit, we've already complied with their requirements other than the garbage storage. It was not required by the city when we applied for the building permit. So the application before you today is not of a laneway suite. It's a building behind the building, and that's why you have all these variances. The laneway suite itself had no variances. Like I said, yesterday I spoke to the owners of 243 Keele Street, which were the only neighbors on Keele that sent a concern letter. And I explained to them that the material for staging for construction will be done on our property, and that we will not be using that laneway for any other reason at all. The variances before you are based on a building behind a building. The actual laneway suite by itself has no variances. For this reason, I ask you to please approve this application.
Thank you very much. Moderator, let's go to the first speaker.
Mr. Chair, the first speaker, it's Luba and Bowden Sersky. And Luba, I've unmuted you. You can go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm sorry, we don't, I don't know why I can't show us on camera, but we are both here, myself and my husband, Bo Chersky. Hi. Thank you to the committee for allowing us to speak. This is our first time participating in this kind of a process, and so Ian is correct. We did speak with him yesterday, and he allayed some of our concerns about the laneway. But if I could just, I'm just going to pull up the letter to reference our letter, because there were a couple of questions that we wanted to ask as the variances are under consideration. And that is, as we had said earlier in our letter, we have an agreement with the city for to be able to access the rear of our property through the parcel of land. Oh, there's the letter. Thank you for bringing it up. So we have an agreement that we entered into with the city in order to access the back of our property, to bring our cars to the back of the property to park there. And we pay for that right monthly. And so the question that we had was the committee, or will the committee look at the variances request within the context of that agreement and any other agreements that may exist with other adjoining lots?
Hello?
Yeah, what we want to hear from you is, what we need to hear from you is your concerns about the impact of the minor variances proposed.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So that's what, if you could tell us, you say that some of your concerns were allayed. Just share with the committee the nature of your concerns as they stand now, having spoken to the applicant yesterday, please.
Okay. Okay, so if you, I would ask you to look at the question B on our letter of concern was, is there an encroachment onto the lane? Because we were told when we entered into an agreement with the city that the two garages at 249 and 251 were encroaching. So we would just like to know if that is or is not the case.
Okay, we're going to put that to the applicant when we return to him. That question.
Okay.
Did you discuss that with him yesterday?
Yes, but I thought it would be a good question to put to the city because it is relating to the city.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
Does that make sense? Like he can't speak for the city.
The committee doesn't necessarily have the answer to that. We don't know. We're going to go back to the applicant and ask what his understanding of that is. So do you any?
I can help with some information.
Just a second, applicant, if you'd stand by, please. Okay.
Okay.
Luba's still on her time. Luba, do you have anything further to add?
Yes, the next, I'd refer you to question C on our letter of concern. Would, if these variances are granted or accepted, would that have any impact on the designation of the parcel of land to which I was referring?
Yes, these are zoning type issues that the committee can't just answer to you now. What the committee is doing is looking at the various minor variances that are proposed here, and listening to what concerned neighbors have to say with respect to those and the impact of those variances on them. So some of these issues that you're bringing up are beyond our purview. Sorry.
Okay, my husband wanted to, no, you're okay? Okay, then there was one other additional point that I just wanted to ask, and that was if there, but I suppose it is in relation to the parcel of land. Is there some other venue or recourse where we could raise these issues? Because some of the issues pertaining to the parcel of land aren't, they're related to the variances, but they're not questions that the owners of 243 to 249 can answer for us. So there's still some areas where we don't have satisfaction on things that are relating to our access and use of the property.
I'll refer that question to the Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer.
Sorry. Can you just repeat the last part?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that there are still a number of questions that we have with respect to the parcel of land in our agreement with the city, and why this isn't relevant, like, because it is abutting 249 and 251 Keele. The thing that's really paramount to us is that we have unfettered access to our property over that piece of land. So Mr. DeKunik has indicated that they will not be using the parcel of land as a staging area, and that's great. That is what we wanted to hear. But it seems to us that there are also some related issues pertaining to our agreement, and we don't really have a sense of satisfaction from the city that our rights with respect to our agreement are going to be recognized. So I guess we're looking for some other form of recourse or some other venue where we can have our concerns heard.
So that's something you would have to reach out to the city. I mean, where did you get the agreement signed that gives you that right? To me, it looks like a lane that ends at 251. So 249 does not look like it has the benefit to use that lane without trespassing over other people's properties at the rear.
But the proposed new structure would abut that parcel of land.
It can abut the rear lot line, but they're not going to be using it to access that structure. So it's not considered a laneway suite, it's considered a rear structure containing a dwelling unit. So all the access they will have is through their own property from the front.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next registered speaker.
Mr. Chair, the next registered speaker is Janet Lee.
Good evening.
Janet, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead. Janet Lee, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead. Janet, we can't hear you, but I'm going to try giving you a call.
I think she keeps muting herself.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We do hear you now,
Can you hear me now?
We hear you now.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. So my name is Janet Lee. I live to the rear of this property at 378 Indian Grove. I oppose the following variances. Rear yard setback is 1.5 meters versus 7.5 meters required. This is not a minor variance, as there is virtually no rear yard, and the rear facade will be too close and too visually prominent, affecting the enjoyment of my property. The second variance I oppose, building depth is 31.6 meters versus 17 meters. That is also not minor. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. And also I oppose variances 1, 2, and 3. These are regarding residential uses at the rear is prohibited. Again, this is not a minor variance. So that there are 3 variances regarding whether or not residential use is permitted at all should send alarm bells that there is something wrong with the conformity to the official plan, let alone the zoning bylaw. So I want to touch upon a broader issue for this application. This is regarding constructing a laneway suite where they were not intended to be built. So we know from the applicant there was a building permit that was denied in 2019 because his lane is not a public lane, it's not maintained, it's not paved, there's no catch basins, etc. So, and laneway suites must abut a public lane as per the definition. So now what is being proposed today is to allow laneway suites in the broader R zones without lanes. This is not a minor undertaking. So for example, in 2018, to implement laneway suites, city planning brought forth a report. It had a new specific use bylaw that was narrowly scoped to the definition of a laneway suite that abuts a public lane. And of greater importance for the committee's consideration is that this bylaw was accompanied by and required an official plan amendment due to the significance of this change. This OPA was also narrowly tied to the definition of a laneway suite abutting a public lane. So now we have a proposal, if you want to put a laneway suite throughout the broader R zone category, not on a public lane, this was not intended by the 2018 zoning bylaw or official plan. In my view, you would need to follow the same process as the 2018 initiative because it is a major undertaking. The process in 2018 was public consultation, study, staff report, council approval, zoning bylaw amendment, official plan amendment, and council direction to monitor this building type for 3 years. As such, the proposal to have a 2-story rear residential rear yard buildings is clearly not the type of development that should be approved by minor variance. So a few details on the built form variances, if you could go to my letter, page 2. On rear yard setback of 1.5 meters, so I've mentioned the impacts to my property. The diagram that is on the right is showing a pattern of development of 1.5 meter rear yards. This is completely insufficient. Open space is eroded in quantity and quality of light, sky view, and privacy if the other neighbors decide to follow this variance. So rear yard setbacks of 1.5 meters should only be permitted for buildings that qualify for the laneway suites bylaw section 150.8. That's where the 1.5 meter comes from. I have issues with the rear windows on the east facade. I have concerns of overlook that, coupled with the insufficient rear yard, will affect my enjoyment of the backyard. So in the diagram as well as a pattern, you can see the impacts that would have. So if you're sitting in your backyard and you get 2nd floor residential windows overlooking your rear lot line at a setback of only 1.5 meters away. So this location of windows should only, again, be permitted for buildings that qualify for the laneway suites bylaw, because the ramifications to the greater R zone are significant. In terms of building depth, similarly, 31.6 meters versus the 17 meters proposed does not allow for rear yard open spaces. So this means if repeated by your neighbors, you can build a 2-story facade built almost along the full extent of the side property line. So it is true this proposal has a gap in the building depth, but when this building is evaluated under the residential zone category as it should be, the depth shows up as 31.6 meters because 2 residential buildings on the same lot are simply not permitted. So regarding variances 1, 2, and 3, that is about residential building at rear is not a permitted building type. I would like to address the built form implications of this matter. So in our zones, a permitted rear yard building is a 4-meter high ancillary building without residential uses. This is a pattern of development that should be upheld. If you go to page 3 of my letter.
I'm going to ask you to make your summary now, please.
Pardon me?
I'll ask you to make your summary now, please.
Oh, okay. So it is clear that the intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan is to not spread laneway suites into the broader R zones where there are no lanes. I would imagine that council, public, and all involved in the 2018 initiative for laneway suites would be very surprised if it had been decided as a minor variance that this building type is to occur unrestricted in all R zones across the city without consultation, study, or official plan amendment. As it does not pass the 4 tests, in my opinion, this application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Panel members, any questions for the speaker? Okay. And moderator, do we have another speaker standing by? Okay, then, there are no further speakers standing by in opposition, so we'll go back now to the applicant.
Committee members, there's also a planning report that wasn't in your package for this application that has a recommended condition. So Lori, if you can share that.
Please.
It's to tie it to plans.
By the way, can I ask if Janet is a planner?
I think she's been muted now now. Sorry about that, Aaron.
Okay.
You wanted to ask me or the applicant?
I want to ask Jeanette.
Oh, Janet Lee.
Jeanette,
Hello?
yeah.
Oh, yes, I do work for urban design as an architect for city planning. However, I've been very careful to keep that separate from my role as a resident.
I understand. It's just the way you articulate the argument and your understanding of the secondary street kind of makes me wonder if you're a planner or an architect. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's go back now to Lori, who's going to. Lori, do you have this planning? If you could, there it is. Okay, I'm having trouble reading it, and can you expand it at all or not? Okay. So this panel is a planning report that we did not get, I'm afraid, in time, and it's recommending according with the plans submitted on February 19. And could I see the heading of this letter, please? I'm wondering who this is from. It's a staff report. Okay. Dated May the 26th.
Can we see the rest of it, please, the rationale?
Sorry, can you scroll down?
So the recommendation there is to tie an approval, if we were to make one, to the plans of February 19th. Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just ask Barb or staff just a quick clarification question? I'm struggling with this one because it sounds pretty complicated. It's got a bit of a checkered past, and it was a laneway. It's not a laneway, and it looks to me like this is more like a garden suite. And I wonder, Barb, if you could just give us a status of where the city's at with respect to its review of garden suites.
So there has been an initiative called EHON. It's I can't remember the correct wording of the acronym, but it's to increase housing options in residential areas. So the first part of that was the actual laneway suites bylaw, which has now been there for a few years. And they are looking at other options similar to garden suites to open up the opportunities where properties that don't just abut a laneway. No formal report or bylaw has been passed, but it is an initiative that is supported to a certain degree by planning. Obviously, they review each application to consider how it may affect the area and what the variances are. So in this case, planning has reviewed it, and they've just asked the condition to tie it to plans to ensure that no revisions are made once an approval is potentially obtained by an applicant, since there are no other standards to apply if it's not a laneway suite.
Great, thanks.
Barb, can I just ask one question further to that? My understanding is, and I may be incorrect, that the concept and understudy maybe be in a piloted area of, I think, Councillor Bradford's ward, which I think is Beaches, East York, but that's the only area that's under pilot at the moment. Is that correct?
That I'm not too sure about. I know they've been encouraged to a certain degree across various parts of the city, not just in the Toronto East Stroke District. So it's not just isolated to the downtown core. The laneway suites bylaw was expanded to be citywide, but obviously that hasn't addressed a lot of the housing issues and shortages that the city's been facing. So that's why there have been discussions on this topic, but there's nothing that's been formalized to provide as a policy or direction with standards.
Okay. So we haven't yet been back to the applicant for his rebuttal. So let's do that now. And
Yes, sir. I have been listening to your conversation, and I think the issue with this particular application was that the City of Toronto, the zoning bylaw, the planners, and the building department, because unlike what the lady from Humber Grove, Indian Grove said, we actually do have a building permit. We were not refused a building permit. So this portion of city property, because it's not paved, it's not considered a laneway, a private city driveway. That's why the people from 243 are having this issue, these questions, is because they're basically being forced to pay rental to be able to use this so-called driveway to their property. So when we applied for this building permit, and the reason we got the building permit is because the building department looked at this laneway and said, you know, this is acceptable for a laneway suite. So listening to the opposition, one of the things that we have to understand is that the access to the garage that was at 249, that was demolished, by the way, is actually through a right-of-way through the backyard of 251. So the garage at 249 and 251 have access from the city driveway through the backyard of 251 and 249. And the reason we're improving the situation, and when I heard that landscaping was an issue, is that we are actually providing 25 feet of landscaping where there's a driveway now. So as far as we're looking at this application today before you, the reason we have these variances and the reason that staff does not have an issue, transportation does not have an issue, is because these variances are only there because we have no other way to go to the Committee of Adjustment without behind the building variance. I needed a zoning review to give me a variance that I can come to the Committee of Adjustment and apply for this. And this was something that it was agreed with the legal department of the city and our lawyer that this was the only way to be able to clear this. So again, we have a building permit, we have a zoning application that was approved. We designed this laneway suite as a laneway suite, so 1.5 meters from the gravel laneway, where the garage right now is almost right on the property. We're actually having to push it back 1.5 meters because that's what the laneway suite bylaw requires. So as far as windows, the two windows that are facing Indian Grove is a bedroom window, a small bedroom window, and the window that is on the stairwell going up to the second floor. So the amount of privacy, and by the way, Indian Grove is a street that's way down low below the level of Keele. So we're actually looking at the roofs of their houses at the bottom, and the garages, in their garages. So as far as privacy, that should not be an issue whatsoever, because most of the bigger windows are facing the house itself. So other than that, if there's any questions that I can answer, please ask.
Okay, thank you.
So
applicant.
members,
Yes.
just one thing to correct, on your site plan, it does show as a laneway at the back, which it isn't. But I've looked up the information about the garden suites, and it is going to planning and housing on June 28th, the report. So Garden Plus Suites project is one of the several studies that the City of Toronto is leading through its Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods initiative. That's the EHON. A garden suite is a detached housing unit usually located in the rear yard and is separate or detached from the main house. Garden suites, like laneway suites, are generally smaller than the main house on the lot and are intended to function as a rental housing unit. The Garden Plus Suites project will review important matters, which will include privacy and shadowing, protecting trees and green space, and parking, among many others. This study seeks public input from current and future residents of low-rise neighborhoods and other stakeholders to understand these important matters. The results from this review and public input will inform regulations and recommendations to City Council to permit garden suites as of right across the city. For more information about the Garden Plus Suites projects, please see the Garden Suites review report submitted to the Planning and Housing Committee. Information about other studies currently under review as part of the city's Expanding Housing Options in Neighborhoods initiative is also available. So that's on the city planning webpage for anyone looking for more information.
Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer, then, I'll admit to being confused by this application on what we're trying to decide on here. Why then are we getting this application in advance of that consideration by, I think you mentioned it was by council itself? I'm finding that I'm really finding that the framework here that I'm trying to compare this application to is quite foggy, and so I think we'll take it into a committee now, so that the committee members can speak. Whether you're as confused as I am, I don't know, committee members, but I'm finding that I'm not sure whether we're dealing with a laneway house application. If we're dealing with a garden suite application, it's my understanding that those are not yet legal. So this application, in that case, ought to be deferred until after that consideration by council at the end of the month.
Well, no, that's just going to planning. That's a study to share the input from people that have been interested. A report going to planning and housing. It's not quite at a stage, I think, anywhere close to going to council for a bylaw. So I think it's still in the preliminary stages, and planning has reviewed this application and they've made their recommendation. If they had thought it to be premature, then they probably would have asked for a deferral or a refusal. There's nothing preventing applicants from submitting applications. The difficulty is there are no bylaw standards to apply, so that's why you have variances relating to number of residential buildings or the location of a building on the lot. And I think that's partly why planning has asked that it be tied to plans to ensure that nothing larger or different is constructed if approved.
Yeah, that's helpful. I mean, as much as I think we'd love council to deal with the garden suite thing quickly, I think probably that is some distance away in terms of getting the regs out. So Can I, Chair, can I ask through, I do have one last question of the applicant before we
ahead.
go back into committee, would you mind?
No, I don't mind at all.
I wonder if you, I think I heard you say early on, and I just want to confirm, that if this were in fact a laneway suite, if it was a laneway as designated by the city, that your application would conform with the existing laneway suite provisions, regulations? Would you require any variances if this was actually considered as a laneway suite?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Clay, we actually, part of the package that I submitted is the zoning certificate that was given to us. So we actually applied for zoning review, and the zoning review came back saying that we comply with everything in regards to the bylaw of laneway suites. And again, we also already have a building permit for this laneway suite that's before you.
Yeah, that's right. No, I just wanted to confirm that there wasn't anything in your proposal that would be inconsistent with what the current provisions for laneway suites are. Notwithstanding the variances you're asking for a detached dwelling on site, which are different than laneway suites, right?
Correct, sir. Correct.
But Ian, the question, this isn't a laneway suite. So you have to be very careful. You can't say you comply because you got a zoning review. They didn't review this as a laneway suite. Because you don't abut a lane. The question is, if they were to apply the standards that apply to a laneway suite, would you comply or would you need variances for the structure that is proposed?
Okay.
Right. That's right. Thank you, Barb.
Okay.
Okay, Barb, I understand. But if you look at the zoning certificate, it says laneway suite.
Right, but it doesn't, you don't have variances to the laneway suite bylaw because you don't abut a lane. They've labeled it perhaps that way, but look at your variances. None of them are to the laneway suites bylaw. It's saying that you have two structures. You're having a residential building in the rear. You wouldn't have those variances if it was a true laneway suite.
Correct. So if it was considered a laneway suite, we would not have any variances whatsoever.
Okay. I'm gonna take this back into the committee. I want to hear the committee's committee. I'm having quite a bit of difficulty with this application because I'm hearing that it's not a laneway suite application. And excuse me. Okay, just a second. And my sense is that garden suites aren't permitted. So it falls in. You know what we're being asked to deal with here doesn't meet the criteria for a laneway suite, and garden suites aren't permitted. This looks like a garden suite to me, but garden suites aren't permitted. So my view would be that we have to refuse the application. What do other people think? Go ahead.
I just want to chime in. I mean, it's a very unfortunate situation for the applicant that the city made a mistake and thought that this is a laneway and issued a permit and comes back to here. And I don't think the committee has the power to preemptively review this application as a garden suite. There's no way we can just approve it based on that. If this is not a laneway, we are sorry. You know, this is not a laneway suite. We cannot review it as if it is a laneway suite, because even if the garden suite bylaw comes out, it is not going to turn it into a laneway. I mean, if you're telling me that this laneway is going to be an official laneway in 2 weeks, and you have some sort of documents to prove that, that's a different story. So for that reason, very unfortunately, I don't think we can support this application.
Other comments, please. Mr. Byatt. You're muted, Mr. Byatt.
I'm sorry. As I said, my first confusion started when I heard the applicants indicate that it's a building behind a building, and that kind of threw me off. Is it a laneway suite? Is it not a laneway suite? And then, of course, the garden suite. So I think it is very confusing. And as Mr. Chang has said, I think it's unfortunate for the applicant. But without that kind of clarity for us, it's hard for us to actually deal with it.
Agreed. Ms. Hayes?
I just want to add in, I think it's unfortunate that we didn't receive a more substantive report from planning with respect to background. It would appear, and I agree that it's unfortunate that the city may have issued a permit that should not have been issued, assuming that it was in fact a laneway. I agree we can't rectify we can't rectify that. I agree the garden suites matter is under public consultation and under continued consideration from the city, but it's not here yet. And what we are asking to be consider is a house behind a house, and regardless of the circumstances that we're here, I can't support that.
Mr. Clay, any thought?
Oh, yeah, I'd echo everything that we've heard. I think, you know, as a committee, when we make a decision, we have to have some confidence that what we're making a decision on is consistent with you know, what the bylaw says. Notwithstanding the fact that planning staff have given us some advice, I think collectively we still find ourselves a little bit confused on this one, and it is unfortunate. It's an opportunity lost, at least in the short term, to add accommodation to an area which would benefit from it. But perhaps with a little bit more work and energy and between the agent and staff, we can get some clarity, and maybe this one could be brought back in a way that the committee would feel comfortable dealing with.
Well then, I'll look to the panel for a motion, whether it's to defer or whether it's to refuse.
I'll take a stab at a motion. I would make a motion to refuse the application, as I don't believe that what is proposed meets the intent of the zoning bylaw and official plan.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? It
Yeah,
is
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Byatt. So,
sorry.
Moved and seconded to refuse the application. All those in favor, show of hands, please. The motion is carried and the application is refused. Panel moves along.
Mr. Chair, we're just gonna need 2 minutes to switch our YouTube session.
Very good. We do have a need for a technical. In fact, what we'll do at this stage, because panel's been going for over 2 hours again, so we'll take a 10-minute break. Panel, see you back in 10 minutes sharp at 8:20, and we'll carry on from there.
For those watching on YouTube, the stream is going to end in a moment, and there will be a new similarly titled stream that will become available.
Very good.